For those new to my channel, hi, I'm Shiro Matsunoki. Welcome to the Matsunoki Cafe. That's what I like to call my channel. In April of last year, I started analyzing Honkai Star Rail characters that were involved in the main storyline of Penacony. Those did way better than I was expecting and have helped my channel grow a ton. Not long after I finished analyzing Penacony characters, I jumped ship, no pun intended, into analyzing Xianzhou characters. What you're watching right now is a compilation of all the Xianzhou character analysis videos stitched into one. Through them, I want to see why the first Luocha storyline ended up being regarded by most of the player base as being the weakest arc of HSR, and how it turned itself around with the continuance quest featured in versions 2.4 and 2.5. By the way, I'm aware of how funny it is that this video is coming out on the day that it is. March is here in spirit with these analyses. There are a lot of characters to cover, so grab some snacks, a drink, and strap in. A few things to stay up front before we start. First and foremost, a majority of the footage in the video isn't mine. It was borrowed from the following channels you see on the screen. 2. If I mispronounce any names or terminology, I apologize in advance. And 3. If anyone's curious where Jingliu is, go watch my Penacony compilation.
Practice is over!
Yanqing is the youngest lieutenant of the Cloud Knights and the retainer of the Luocha's general Jingliu. He managed to rise up in the ranks due to his immense talent in swordplay. He's also a massive fraud and has lost to everyone he's gone up against in the story, and it only took 4 patches for him to be power crept into oblivion by Jingliu. Thank you for watching this video. This is one part of a series of analysis videos. Don't worry, Yanqing fans. All 3.2 thousand of you, holy sh*. I'm playing around. I promise I'll analyze this boy's lore to the best of my ability. I just made fun of him being considered a super skilled swordsman, but to give credit where it's due, it's accurate. The best way to put it is that Yanqing is the Jogo of Honkai Star Rail, a character who is very strong and skilled, but all their notable fights are against characters way stronger than them. Despite that, Yanqing does get moments to let his expertise shine. His companion quest has him compete against Jingliu. At the end, Jingliu pulls out her ultimate move to attack the boy, which he managed to deflect. Now, that alone is a pretty great feat, but it's what he does after that encounter that's crazy. We see in the 1.2 story quest that Yanqing memorized Jingliu's technique and had already come up with his own version of it, which he uses in his fight with Blade and Dan Heng. And if you think that's a coincidence, Blade points out the similarities of the two moves during the scripted fight.
So familiar. Did she teach you?
To use a metaphor any Sonic fans in the audience will understand, you know how in Sonic Adventure 2, Sonic saw Shadow pull off Chaos Control and from that alone he learned to perform it himself? Yeah, it's like that. And most recently in 2.5, he pulled off this move against Tule. I think at this point we can officially agree he's proven how skilled he is. Yanqing is a super quick learner, a clear sign of his natural affinity for the sword. His high level of skill is also communicated through the sword itself. As elaborated on in Sword Essence, a quest during the first continuance mission of the Luocha, his main sword Yanshou has the capability to fly and move in tandem with one's mind, and Jingliu points out that's only his main sword. He summons 6 flying daggers which he controls with Qi, aka spiritual energy, having them soar around and shred through enemies. Being able to simultaneously orchestrate the movements of that many swords is clear proof of innate talent and a dexterous mind. His first character story outright says such skill couldn't be obtained even by Cloud Knight drill masters in a century. And here's this adolescent boy pulling it off like it's no big deal. The Yan in Yanqing means elegant or accomplished, while the Qing part means high-ranking official. Yanqing is certainly a high-ranking official, being the youngest lieutenant. He's accomplished a lot for someone his age, and elegant is a good way to describe his fighting style. However, the origin behind the boy's name goes deeper than that. After all, he's one of several XP characters in HSR. Yanqing is this universe's version of Ma Fei Ma, a man who formerly went by Ma Yanqing. In the world of Honkai Impact 3rd, Ma Fei Ma is one of the 7 swords of Tai Xuan, disciples of Huohuo. He is the 6th disciple and the only male. Like our young lieutenant in HSR, Ma Fei Ma is a skilled swordsman who was taught at an early age. Due to being an orphan, he didn't have a solid parental figure while growing up. That led to him developing into an unusual man who has a habit of picking fights with random people he sees as worthwhile opponents. Think of characters along the lines of Kenpachi and Inosuke. He's insane and an alcoholic, overall not a great guy to be around. Thankfully, We don't have to worry about that for Lo Yanqing. Jingliu is legitimately a great father figure and mentor. He recognizes Yanqing's insane level of talent, but also understands that strength alone doesn't make a respectable swordsman. Thus, while teaching the boy swordplay and war tactics, the wise general is also trying to teach Yanqing patience and restraint. Yanqing is associated with swallows, as their likeness is a motif in his outfit. The tiny bird often symbolizes hope, passion, and protection. Yanqing is definitely a kid full of hopeful ambitions. The protection symbolism is often tied to home, and since he's a high-ranked Cloud Knight, he naturally has a duty to keep the Luofu safe. You could also interpret it as him wanting to help the people he's close to, such as Jingliu, wanting to carry some of the burdens off the general's shoulders. In China specifically, swallows often represent the coming of spring. That's why one of the light cones featuring Yanqing is titled River Flows in Spring, and even features a swallow in the illustration. One more thing to note is that I think the relatively small size of the swallow can also tie back into Yanqing as a character. At the end of the day, despite Yanqing's many accomplishments, he's a boy, not a man. He has a lot of room to grow and mature. He's got a hollow skull that's filled solely with thoughts about cool swords. As quoted from the boy himself in his third character story, "Interests are temporary, my sword is forever." He hyperfixates on swordsmanship, building up a huge sword collection and aiming to continuously get stronger until he gains the title of Sword Champion of the Luofu, a title that's been vacant since Jingliu was exiled from the Xianzhou. He wants to make history and be recognized as the pinnacle of swordsmen for generations to come. Jingliu's character in part serves as a dark foil for Yanqing. As told in Jingliu's Myriad Celestia trailer, Jingliu's stories of the former sword champion inspired Yanqing to seek the title for himself. Jingliu shows what the boy could become if he continued down his current path, discarding old personal attachments to keep getting stronger. Jingliu is trying to set the boy down the opposite road. As the boy's fourth character story so eloquently puts it, Yanqing is a sword without a sheath. To become a respectable swordsman, he must learn to control his strength rather than obtaining more of it. And he seems to already be on the path of controlling his strength by realizing why he wants that strength in the first place. His speech during March to Mastery describes the character development Yanqing has gone through up to this point. After his encounter with Jingliu, he's been in a rut, feeling lost with next to no self-confidence. Because of that, he began to wonder what his purpose was for wielding a sword, and after talking to Jiaoqiu, he's come to find his reason.
As a member of the Cloud Knights, and the General's apprentice, I've had a weight on my shoulders. And I know there's still more to shoulder. But when I wield my sword, it feels like I'm letting go of everything. I love the feeling of giving it my all, facing any obstacle in front of me, pressing forward. That's why I wield my sword.
I'm really glad I did this analysis for Yanqing. He was a character I was pretty indifferent to prior to working on this project, but as I did research and wrote this script, I grew an appreciation for his characterization. And hopefully this video was able to do the same for people watching who similarly felt indifferent towards him.
Blade drawn, mountains fall!
Yunli, granddaughter of Huohuo, the Arbiter General of the Xianzhou Juming. She was the first featured 5-star upon the Express Cruise revisit to the Luofu in 2.4. She was given a companion mission in that same patch. The last companion mission we got was Black Swan and Sparkles back in 2.0. Wow, saying that out loud made me realize how fast time flies. Anyway, with the companion mission and the heavy focus on her during 2.4's portion of the continuance quest, there's more than enough material to cover in a character analysis, so let's stop beating around the bush. Yunli's most notable personality trait is her fervent passion for swords. At the start of her companion mission, we have a conversation with her where she looks at the Trailblazer's baseball bat, and through it, can deduce things about them as a person. She tells us she often does this with swords, gauging what kind of person the swordsman is based on their weapon, stating swords always tell the truth. In The Quieting of Quillians, she mentions how she talked to Yanqing's sword and was told by it that he would often hesitate before striking and struggle to keep a level head. She's like N from Pokemon, but instead of talking to fantasy creatures, it's swords. Although Yunli isn't actually talking to swords most of the time, the only time she's really communicating with weapons are cursed swords that contain Heliobi in them, and very possibly Yanqing's flying sword, as we know from the quest Sword Essence that it has a mind of its own. From the way it's brought up in this conversation, she's using it more like a metaphor for her personality reading. Or at least that's what I thought until I looked at Yunli's dialogue when she visits the Express, where she outright stated that after she forged old metal, she's been able to hear the thoughts of all types of weapons. So I guess she can talk to weapons? I don't know what to believe anymore. If you couldn't tell by how I've been describing it, Yunli doesn't have the best grasp of social cues. As a girl who grew up around swords her whole life, she associates and interprets the world around her through their swords or other weaponry. However, this relative lack of social awareness does lead to her being rather frank and straightforward, as her drip marketing put it. It's during that same squabble with Yanqing that Yunli gives some insight into the philosophy of swordsmanship native to her ship.
You know the Cloud Knight saying, a Cloud Knight must never let slip their weapon. Yes?
I told you, a ranger never lets go of his weapon. Next time, we just won't let go.
Sorry, I brought that up so I could use that clip and say fuck Megaforce. Anyway, we get actual insight into Zhu swordsmanship when Yunli and Yanqing begin training March 7th. When debating on what area to focus March's improvement on, Yunli has this to say.
Instead of focusing on her strengths, we should address her weaknesses. The drawback of wielding two swords is not generating enough force. What good is being quick on your feet if you don't have strength? It's not like we're dancing here.
Skilled sword masters know how to play to their strengths and work on their weaknesses. Start with what you're good at, then tackle your weaknesses. That's the right way to learn.
Both of these perspectives are byproducts of their upbringings. As Yanqing establishes during the quest, how he acts as a mentor is based on what Jingliu did while teaching the boy, so it's possible his philosophy on working on your strengths, then your weaknesses, was something Jingliu taught him early on. The same goes for Yunli. Her father, or General Huohuo, taught her to first focus on improving at what she's not good at to increase her overall prowess and leave no blind spots for enemies to exploit. It was likely the general that instilled this mindset of teaching into his granddaughter, as during the quest by words of many, he recognized Yanqing and Yunli couldn't get along and decided both could improve by learning to work together through co-mentoring March. To put it in RPG terms, because just like Yunli, I also associate the world through things I hyperfixate on, Yanqing is the guy to dump all his points into one stat, while Yunli would play the same game with an all-rounder build. The only thing their training methods have in common is that both are very hard on their pupil, as evident by the end of Yunli's Keeping Up with Star Rail video.
Well, why not meet halfway and combine your training techniques?
Mr. Albert, you're absolutely right! We'll get the apprentice to do 50 sets of strength exercises and run 15 miles every day!
That poor apprentice really has it rough.
Poor March, I understand why she ditches practice all the time. Yunli puts a lot of emphasis on the strength and force of an attack. Mankarsua, another HSR analysis YouTuber, made a video about Yanqing and Yunli, dedicating a whole segment to their differences in gameplay. I'm not going to repeat the whole video, you can go watch it yourself after finishing this one, but he pointed out how you can see Yunli's philosophy as a swordswoman in her gameplay. She wants the enemy to come at her, so that way they're close enough that she can't miss and strike as hard as she can at the opening. It's possible this is a very common style of sword fighting for Zhu natives. The Zhu in the ship's name means vermilion, cinnabar, or some shade of red. Ming can be read as bright, so the full name of the ship means a bright vermilion. This was picked as the ship's name due to fire being an element closely tied to it in many ways. The general of the ship is known as the Flaming Heart. Yunli is part of the Flame Wheel Octet, and in the list of arch enemies readable, it's mentioned how Zhu residents like to play with fire. To add on to that, her outfit is inspired by murals present in the Mogao Caves in Danxiang, China. The city's name, Danxiang, means blazing beacon, meaning that her outfit connects to the fiery imagery. Fire often serves as a symbol for bravery and power, which is why it's the emphasized element of a subculture that puts high value in strength. So why is Yunli a physical unit and not a fire one? I'm assuming it's because Firefly came out the patch before her. While on the topic of her being a playable unit, Yunli's giant sword deserves some analysis too. She calls it old metal. That's mettle, as in showing great fortitude and resilience when faced with a struggle, something that you can definitely use to describe Yunli's counter-based fighting style. Of course, it's meant to be a play on words where it sounds like old metal, like the substance. In fact, the name of her sword in the Chinese text is literally old metal, though the pun is lost in translation. In some Chinese dialects, the symbol used to describe iron or metal can also be used as an adjective to describe a close friendship. So by calling her sword old metal, she's calling it a dear friend of hers. I understand why they couldn't replicate that double meaning, so they went with a different play on words that still works with the character. As for her own name, Yun means clouds, most likely referencing her position as a Cloud Knight and member of the Flame Wheel Octet on the Zhuming. The Li in her name means glass. It took me a second to connect this to the character, but I realized this could be another connection to fire. While typically glass cracks from how hot fire is, fire-rated glass is specifically engineered to withstand exposure from that high level of heat. This is the type of glass you might see set around fireplaces. I like to interpret this in relation to how often she melts cursed swords, but we'll get back to that later. Before we talk about Yunli's story quest, I want to dive deeper into her dynamic with Yanqing. I already went a bit into this earlier when I was describing their different methods of teaching, but it's much more than that. The two are intentionally designed to be foils for each other. Feixiao describes the two's differing fighting styles rather perfectly after she caught both their swords.
However, both of you have shortcomings. One of you focuses on dodging and weaving, while the other relies on brute strength, trying to take down targets with a single strike.
This is also communicated in their choice of weaponry. Yanqing uses multiple swords, so he can barrage and overwhelm his opponent with multiple attacks at once, while Yunli wields one great sword and swings with enough force that most opponents will go down in 1 or 2 direct hits. Yanqing's speech during March to Mastery establishes how he's recently discovered why he wields his sword and what he wants to achieve through winning the Ringmaster's Challenge. But when Jiaoqiu asks Yunli, she says she doesn't have a dream like Yanqing does, stating she only entered the tournament because of a promise she made with her grandpa. She does, however, go into detail about her hunt for the cursed swords forged by her father. Now, she believes not everyone deserves to wield a sword. Yanqing is focused on self-improvement, while Yunli's primary goal has less to do with herself and more to do with righting the wrongs of her father. Now, they are not total opposites, they have some things in common as well. They're both very talented sword masters at their young age and are high-ranked members of the Cloud Knights on their respective ships. They were taken in and trained by the generals of their ships. Due to being around swords for a majority of their life, they've both grown highly fixated on swordsmanship, with both collecting swords, albeit for different reasons. While comparing and contrasting the two, I think now's the best time to talk about this. When Yunli was announced, people assumed she was an XP of Ling Jiaoqiu, the first disciple of Huohuo in HI3 and Ma Feima's wife. One of the biggest reasons in favor of this fan theory was that Jingliu tried to set up Yanqing with Yunli, and the two gained together would parallel how their counterparts are married in another universe. This fan theory doesn't hold much water, if any. The only thing they have in common is their dark hair and gold eyes. Hoyoverse tends to have the same voice actor return for XPs of the same character. Bronya, Sela, Sushang, Acheron, they all have the same Chinese and Japanese VAs as their HI3 counterparts. Yunli doesn't have the same VA in either language as Jiaoqiu. Sure, Yanqing doesn't share either VA with Ma Feima, but the fact Ma Feima's original name was Ma Yanqing was enough to prove this boy was an XP. Yunli isn't a name used by Jiaoqiu at any point in HI3, so these were just two characters who happen to have similar features. I'm glad Hoyoverse didn't go down the route of implying these two are destined to be together no matter the universe, because my research has shown me that their relationship is fucked in every way imaginable. Jiaoqiu was 20 years older than him and groomed him into marrying her. Feima is never home and instead is a suicidal maniac constantly picking fights. He cheats on his wife, but the girl he actually likes couldn't care less about him and uses his crush on her to manipulate him. This is the relationship equivalent of Chernobyl, dude. But hey, this time, Yanqing has an actual father figure in his life, and Yunli is the same age as him, so I'm sure this cute little relationship between the two will turn out just fine. Anyway, this is the Yunli character analysis. Enough with Yanqing. I have yet to really go into detail about her companion mission, so let's fix that, shall we? Remember how I brought up earlier that it was likely General Huoyan who taught his adopted granddaughter to focus on her overall strength and improve on her weak points first and foremost? Well, Yunli's companion mission shows him giving her a lesson that fits that mold. He sought to have the cursed sword Gyuyun serve as an example to teach Yunli to be less narrow-minded in her pursuit of them. The first half of the story quest is all about establishing Yunli's intense desire to correct the sins of her father, Han Guang. He forged 1,382 cursed swords, which he made by fusing the blades with heliobi. These cursed swords would turn their wielder, even a total rookie who never used a sword before in their life, into a total master. They would absorb the emotions that could hold a swordsman back, like fear, and replace it with strength and bravery. After a while, all the bloodlust and fear that was soaked up by the heliobi would infect the wielder all at once, turning them into mindless killing machines. Like a karmic punishment, Han Guang became so obsessed with forging stronger and stronger swords that when visitors invaded the Zhuming's palace, he would be fatally stabbed by one of the weapons he forged. Little Yunli would have died that night if General Huoyan didn't save her in the nick of time. And now, Yunli is left to carry the burdens left by her father's mistakes. Quite literally, I might add, as her character story establishes that Old Metal was a sword her father left unfinished due to becoming infatuated with the concept of cursed swords. Yunli wields the huge sword her father discarded to hunt down and melt the cursed blades he forged. She tells the Trailblazer she's already found and melted 312, but Huoyan reveals to us shortly after that she suffered the same number of brutal wounds just to get them. He also recognizes how dedicating her life to pursuing these swords will ultimately be a fruitless one, as she'll be left endlessly traveling the cosmos and likely won't find them all before she ceases to be. Huoyan wants to ensure that won't be the path in life his granddaughter takes.
I took her in to give her a chance at a normal childhood, not to send her on a sword-hunting journey. Even if she manages to melt down all the cursed swords one day, what will she do with her life after?
Gyuyun was in part meant to mitigate Yunli's tunnel vision, to show her not all cursed swords are pure evil. She sees the past of this sword, how his master was a nameless swordsman who was stranded on a snowy planet. Through their efforts of recruiting the people of the planet to fight off the Borison, Gyuyun grew to detest violence, especially when he had to kill his wielder to prevent him from succumbing to Mara. Gyuyun wanted to honor his former master by ending all wars and conflicts in the world, but he's a sword, a weapon. His whole existence hinges on generating and perpetuating conflict. He wondered if he could even choose his destiny like his master did. The only way he could avoid being brandished as a tool for battle was to stand on his master's burial and act as a tombstone, which the sword claimed were the best years of his life. Yunli recognizes that despite her initial belief that all cursed swords were nothing more than generators of malice, there could be swords like Gyuyun who were influenced to be good by their wielders. Yunli still chooses to melt Gyuyun, showing some bit of stubbornness. However, she's more generous than it first seems. By melting him as a sword, she'll transform Gyuyun into something that can't be used for violence and bloodshed. Just like his master, Gyuyun can choose his own destiny upon his rebirth. Yunli's companion mission is a really interesting one. By the end of it, she's still very adamant about hunting down all the cursed swords, but has learned to be more patient with the process. Her learning patience is something Huoyan can be happy about. I like the direction they went with Yunli's development during this quest, and I look forward to seeing how she develops even further later down the line, both as her own character and in her dynamic with Yanqing.
Come feast your eyes! Rise, Phoenix!
We're doing 2 for 1, focusing on the strongest pair of besties on the Xianzhou. Let's start with Guinaifen. Her first appearance in game was during the Ethereum Wars event in 1.4. She's a pretty popular live streamer on the Luocha, though she's quick to clarify when the Trailblazer first meets her that she's not a native. Her real name is Guinevere, and Guinaifen was the Xianzhou name Sushang came up with. The name Guinevere originates from Arthurian legend, being the name of King Arthur's wife. Guinevere means white phantom, and this may be a bit of a stretch, but this could be the reason why she has a prominent role in the Ghostly Grove event? Yeah, I'm definitely doing the stretch of the century here. As for her Xianzhou name, I think I'll let her explain what it means.
My name is Guinaifen. Gui means wood, Nai means to exist, and Fen means fragrant. Rolls right off the tongue, doesn't it?
Funnily enough, the exact spelling of her name is the same as the early Chinese translation for the name Guinevere. But what led Guinaifen to living aboard the Luocha? Well, underneath the bright smile and energetic demeanor is a girl who has lost a lot in her life. Her character story details her past, giving context to the corresponding lyrics she's singing on a live stream to Xianzhou folk music. Guinaifen's homeworld was Count Camelot. She was one of over a dozen siblings that belonged to a very distinguished family. They all lived in a prestigious mansion which provided them peace and happiness. As described by the first line of her second character story, the mansion and the bustling streets around it were her entire world when she was a kid. But everything changed when the Antimatter Legion attacked. No, I'm not just memeing, that's legit a line in the text which I found way funnier than I should have, to be real. Her father died trying to fight off the Legion. Guinevere and her siblings got on a space shuttle while her mother stayed behind and led soldiers to keep fighting the forces of destruction. As they flew out of orbit, Guinevere saw how flames and corpses flooded the streets of the planet she once called home. And just like that, Count Camelot was no more. A good portion of this part of her character story describes Guinaifen's father and her relationship with him. One thing that stood out to me were rumors of him taking part in shady or suspicious acts. I decided to look into the father of the Guinevere and Arthurian legend. Guinevere's father, Leo de Grance, was the King of Camelot, not to be confused with King Arthur's Camelot. At one point, Leo's kingdom is invaded by the Anglo-Saxons, an antagonistic force in Arthurian legend. Camelot was rescued by a young King Arthur and his allies, which led to Arthur meeting his eventual wife Guinevere for the first time. But in HSR's retelling, there was no King Arthur to save the day, or at least not the noble leader he's portrayed as in other media, as one of the rumors Guinevere hears of her father is how he made the king his puppet. The Arthur in HSR's Count Camelot was nothing more than a mouthpiece for Leo de Grance. While on the topic of Guinaifen's family, there's a voice line where she mentions one of her siblings who's also living on the Xianzhou.
I've got more than a dozen siblings. One of them is my older brother. He's also living on the Xianzhou. His name is Longshirla, but he seems to prefer being called Lancelot.
Hey guys, Editing Shiro here to let you know that for the remainder of this video, I mispronounced the name Lingsha as Lingsha. I didn't realize it until after I finished recording and went to get Guinaifen's voice clip. That's on me. I should have checked before I read off the script. Lingsha, like Guinaifen, is the early transcription of the name Lancelot. In Arthurian legend, Lancelot is one of the Knights of the Round Table. The Round Table used to belong to Camelot under the order of Leo de Grance, but was transferred to Camelot and put under Arthur's command after the young king saved Camelot from the Saxons. In the original Arthurian legend and many reimaginings of it, Lancelot and Guinevere have an affair, but HSR isn't the first time the two were reinterpreted as siblings instead. The first instance I could find of these two being siblings was Mobile Legends Bang Bang. Yes, another mobile game did this too. Also, we do see Lingsha post comments during the Ghostly Grove event under the username Lang Lang, and here we see him trying to leech a following off his sister's success. Okay, so fuck this guy. Anyway, back to Guinaifen's backstory. After the destruction of her home planet, she and her siblings would take refuge on Humbert Sigma, a barren planet with an atmosphere that was barely livable. It's directly stated no one would be living on this planet if it weren't for the IPC, who discovered valuable ores and forced people to live there to mine them. Yep, Guinaifen is yet another victim of the IPC. Don't worry, little Gwynny, you're not alone. We have 3 other victims you can talk to. On the poverty-stricken planet, teenage Guinevere had no issue getting along with everyone. Guinevere did not care about people's background. No matter what kind of families people are from, they were equally at risk of perishing before the arrival of tomorrow on this planet. Even in the worst case scenario, she's a naturally friendly person. With such a bubbly personality, it's no wonder she'd find success as a streamer. As time went on, Guinevere and her siblings began to starve. They could barely afford to pay taxes to the IPC, being left with not a cent to pay for food. Her elder brothers would become space pirates to make enough money to feed their little siblings. However, all the siblings would eventually get caught by the IPC and be handed over to the Cloud Knights of the Xianzhou. Funnily enough, when her family got caught, she breathed a sigh of relief. She thought that the Cloud Knights would definitely allow her entire family to die together in dignity. After the miserable life she and her siblings had gone through, she had fully accepted death. But thankfully, the Cloud Knights didn't execute them as their punishment. According to the lyrics at the end of this character story, the Knights pardoned the brothers' crimes and allowed the younger siblings to attend school in the Xianzhou. Lancelot and Guinevere chose to live on the Luofu and would take on the names Lingsha and Guinaifen respectively. Now living on the Luofu, Guinaifen would become a street performer to make ends meet. She learned how to juggle from her brothers and would perform juggling acts at the Exalting Sanctum. She would also go on to incorporate flashy and bizarre acts live in front of a crowd, ranging from fire breathing to smashing slabs with her chest to swallowing swords. And as we know, the next step was performing her acts and more in live streams broadcasted to an even bigger audience. Guinaifen's teenage years were a dark time for her. She and her siblings had hit rock bottom and had nowhere to turn to but piracy. But after you hit rock bottom, you can only go up. Her life would improve tenfold thanks to the generosity of the Xianzhou, with her and her siblings finding a home as outworlders aboard their fleet. The Guinaifen we know now is a successful young lady who can genuinely smile and enjoy life to the fullest. There are a couple things I want to add here that I didn't include in my original video. Both were pointed out by Maria Paz Gonzalez Lesme. Apologies if I mispronounced your name. First off, you could see Guinaifen's motifs with fireworks to be symbolic of her being a short-lived species. In the eyes of Xianzhou natives, Guinaifen's life is an explosion that dies out as fast as it's sparked. She also is commonly depicted alongside Diting, the little robot dogs on the Luofu. The Diting in Chinese myth is a chimera of many different beasts, serving as the steed for Shi Ti Garba, who is commonly regarded as the bodhisattva of hell beings. Shi Ti Garba carries a staff on them and forces the gates of hell to open to bring light to the dark realm. Since Guinaifen's main weapon is a staff, and the Huohuo questline in 1.5 starts with her and Sushang crossing paths with the Ten Lords Commission, who have their own ties to the Chinese underworld, it's pretty clear Guinaifen is a sort of stand-in for the Buddhist monk. It's actually during one of Guinaifen's live performances that she met her best friend Sushang for the first time. Sushang is originally from the Yanqing, and she came to the Luofu for military training. I neglected to mention this, but Guinaifen would carry a ton of explosive material on her, which the Cloud Knights deemed as dangerous to public safety. However, realizing that Guinaifen was only doing what she did out of a desperate attempt to make money, Sushang sympathized with her. That sympathy inspired Guinaifen to turn a new leaf, and the two would become close friends thereafter. By the way, the response of Sushang's parents when they hear how she became friends with Guinaifen is supremely funny. You guys gotta hear this. "Your collusion with hoodlums has worried and aggravated us. Straightforward, trustworthy, and knowledgeable people are good and should make good friends, but expedient, soft, and flattering people are no good and should be avoided." They told her Guinaifen was a bad influence, yet Sushang hangs out with her anyway against her parents' wishes. What a girl boss. I think that's as good a place as any to move the focus of this analysis from Guinaifen to Sushang. Sushang is a rookie Cloud Knight with the hopes to become a legendary figure on par with people like the High Cloud Quintet. She's very much a bright-eyed youth who's always at the ready to help people in need and generally do good. Her dedication to studying swordsmanship has resulted in her having little book smarts and having a hard time reading or writing. When you check her daily messages, her status is as follows: "What illness makes you sleepy as soon as you read a book?" She's pretty illiterate, to say the least. Other examples include her parents outright pointing it out in their letter to her in her 4th character story. "PPS, you made a lot of writing errors, Sushang. Please read more books while you're off duty." And it's "look after myself," not "looking after myself." For context, that last part is a reference to her 3rd character story where Sushang wrote to her parents that she can looking after myself now. And one of her idle animations has her struggling to read a poem correctly. Fun fact, that poem is the same one Jingliu recites in one of his overworld animations. Sushang may not be book smart, but she clearly has her heart in the right place and is trying her best as a Cloud Knight. She's a spring chicken who's eager to grow and develop her skills. Oh shit, that's right, I gotta talk about birds!
Hey, you guys are watching Bird Up!
Of all types of birds, the one most portrayed alongside Sushang are chickens. The rooster is the 10th animal of the Chinese zodiac. Roosters and all other types of chickens serve as symbols of good fortune and prosperity. The year of the chicken is a year personified by devotedness and punctuality. Fittingly enough, you could definitely describe Sushang as devoted to the cause and brand of justice of the Cloud Knights. I compared her to a spring chicken, but that's really what she is. Sushang has a rather simplistic, almost naive view of the world. She still has a good bit of growing up and maturing to do. Her parents advised her to not focus so much on grandiose ambitions of fame or fortune, seeing as Xianzhou people can live on pretty much forever. She should spend her extremely long life focused on more practical goals to achieve. Sushang is young and inexperienced, but she wears her heart on her sleeve and seeks to improve to be an even better Cloud Knight. This inexperience can even be tied to the meaning behind her name. Su can be read simply as plain, and Shang means clothing. Her surname, Li, is a common surname in China that means plum. It's the Chinese equivalent of surnames like Dou or Tanaka, basically. Xu Shang is relatively plain and ordinary compared to everyone else in the Luofu. She isn't blessed by the Eon of the Hunt, has an insane level of talent, has some unique skill or special circumstance, etc. She's kind of like an underdog in her efforts to become a legendary figure in Xianzhou history. Her being the most normal person in the Xianzhou cast is what makes her charming. Every great comedy has a straight man, a relatively normal individual in comparison to the wackiness of the characters surrounding them. On top of that, Xu Shang is an XP character in Star Rail. She's the counterpart of the HI3 character by the same name. In the universe of HI3, Li Shushang was one of the protagonists of the Seven Swords visual novel. She wasn't the most talented swordswoman, but under the tutelage of Ling Xuan, a disciple of Fu Ha, she vastly improved in her usage of Tai Xuan. In HSR, Xu Shang's ultimate is titled Shape of Tai Shu, in reference to her sword style invented by Fu Ha in HI3. The design of the giant chicken Xu Shang summons during her ultimate also originates from HI3, where it was a piece of furniture that could be crafted called the Jingliu plushie. Neat detail. HSR Xu Shang, just like her HI3 counterpart, may not have the most natural talent in swordsmanship, but she is, without a doubt, a hard worker and is improving her swordplay every day. I hope that in the future, we'll see her skills flourish and watch her grow into the legendary Cloud Knight she dreams of being.
All will be revealed in lunar flame!
The former sword champion of the Luofu, mentor of General Jingliu, the leader of the High Cloud Quintet, and Braxophone's wife. Jingliu has many accolades to her name and was once recognized as a legendary hero for the Cloud Knights. After succumbing to Mara and mass murdering her people, she was deemed a traitor to the Xianzhou and was exiled, with all records of her existence being wiped away. So how exactly did this mighty legend fall from grace? Jingliu's story is one that begins with tragedy. She's not originally from the Luofu. She's natively from the Yanqing, a Xianzhou ship that used to be the most bustling of the once 9 flagships. However, the Yanqing would be destroyed by Rahu, an undead planet that was resurrected by Shuhu, an emanator of abundance. Jingliu was one of the few survivors of that incident. She was rescued and taken in by a woman who was clad in armor. For some time after the destruction of the Yanqing, Jingliu was a girl who was so traumatized by the calamity that she rarely spoke a word. One day, the woman handed the young Jingliu her first ever sword, a weapon that was 3 feet 7 inches long and weighed about 7 catties, or a little over 9 pounds for my non-Chinese audience. This sword was unique in that it was condensed from a shaft of sharp ice. It glowed with a dim light, as if it were a sliver of moonlight held in the wielder's hand. The lady told Jingliu to use that sword to fight Borsons, canine humanoids that have been arch enemies of the Xianzhou alliance. She told the girl to speak with actions instead of words, by killing the denizens of abundance who took away her home. From the beginning, Jingliu wielded a sword in her hand to express her desire for vengeance. Every swing of her blade was performed for no other reason than to vanquish the abominations who stood as her enemies. I put focus on the height and weight of her first ever sword because at the end of her 4th character story, she forges an exact replica all on her own. In fact, we see her forge this icy sword in gameplay every time she enters her spectral transmigration state, indicating how much that first lesson of fighting for revenge has stuck with Jingliu all this time. That description of her sword actually fits with the meaning of her name. The Jing in Jingliu means mirror, and Liu means flow, as in the flow of a water current. Her name in full translates to a flow of water, clear as a mirror. Knowing her motif, it's likely referring to water reflecting the moon in the night sky. Her identity is intrinsically linked with her sword. I guess you could say she is her own sword. Get it? That's the name of her light cone? Okay, I'll stop. As Jingliu grew older and became the sword champion of the Luofu, she would meet a craftsman named Yanqing. He gave her a 5-foot long sword he crafted and deemed only she was worthy of. That sword ended up becoming the short sword that Blade fights with in the present day. Jingliu's encounter with Yanqing would lead to the formation of the High Cloud Quintet. She particularly developed a close bond with the other female member of the group, Bai Hong. During their time as a group, Jingliu was no longer alone. She had comrades. She was no longer someone ready to die at any moment in battle. But then, tragedy struck Jingliu's life a second time. And like the first time, this second wave of misfortune was brought about by Xuehuo. Bai Hong would sacrifice herself in a self-destructive attack in order to take Xuehuo down with her, and players know where the story goes from here. Jingliu would be the one to come and slay the draconic monster Bai Hong was turned into, aiming the tip of her sword at what once was her best friend. Seeing this gigantic beast coming at her, she was reminded of the catastrophe she experienced as a child. The zombie planet looming over her, seeking to devour her homeland, her people screaming and running in absolute terror. She felt the same existential dread she felt back then, that she was a tiny insect who could do nothing against such a threat. But she didn't let that fear stop her. She tore off a piece of her skirt and used that fabric as a blindfold. With her vision obscured, she leapt into the air and forged her icy sword, striking the dragon's weak spot and killing it in a flash. Jingliu would develop Mara from this incident, a sickness that affects long-life species. Becoming Mara-struck would result in Jingliu losing her sanity and slaughtering a multitude of people until she was finally stopped by her student. Jingliu wears the blindfold to help maintain her sanity and resist the effects of Mara, but as made clear by her final character story, the blindfold also suppresses her fear. She can't be intimidated by any opponent if she can't see them. So yeah, Jingliu would not be scared in the slightest by John Cena. Who would win in this matchup? Leave your bets in the comments. Notice how in gameplay she takes off the blindfold when she summons her ice sword, the sword she used to kill Bai Hong. Not only does it show that she's going full on berserk in that state, but it shows how with that specific sword in hand, she doesn't need the blindfold. If she could kill a humongous dragon with that sword, then nothing stands a chance against it. She could even cut down the stars in the sky. The moon can represent a lot of things, so it was hard to narrow down a source where I could draw comparisons. I decided to look into the moon arcana of the tarot cards. The card deals with concepts of confusion, madness, and fear, traits we see in Jingliu. On the other hand, the more positive reading of the arcana can represent understanding and intuition, symbolized by moonlight bringing a person a sense of clarity. Jingliu shows these traits by the end of her companion mission.
I did think about giving up on revenge and letting go of everything when I fled the Luofu years ago. However, as time passed, it became more and more clear. It was like an old friend that accompanied me every passing day, always nagging in my ear. The memories of what I did when I was Mara-struck are deeply rooted. Since I am unable to rid myself of them, I decided to face them head-on in the end.
The story of Jingliu is heartrending, to say the very least. At multiple points in her life, she lost everything and was left with no other option but to express her emotions through the swings of her sword. The camaraderie she and her teammates once had no longer exists. Those joyful days are long gone. She's forever a crescent moon with a missing half that no longer exists. All she can do now is face punishment for her sins and keep fighting for revenge. That second part is why she devised this big plan to kill Yao Shi. Yao Shi and their abominations took her home, took her closest ally, took her sanity, took any semblance of happiness she had, and so she had to rely on her first ever lesson of swordsmanship to fight for vengeance, to not just cut down a star, but a god. They are currently building up the Godslayer protocol that was concocted by her, Luocha, and Ruan Mei. Jingliu may have said her final farewells to the other High Cloud members at the end of her companion mission, but that wasn't her final farewell to us, the players. Far from it. Hopefully it won't be long until she makes a proper comeback and we get more answers on what exactly their plot to kill the Abundance entails.
That paradise may be unreachable for me.
Stellaron Hunter Blade, the Immortal Swordsman. As described in his signature light cone, the unreachable side, he had seen all the owners of the swords draw their last breath, but nobody has managed to make him draw his. How did Blade end up with this curse of immortality? Let's turn back the clock and conduct this analysis of Blade through telling the story of the man he used to be, former furnace master of the Zhuming and a member of the High Cloud Quintet, Yanqing. Yanqing is not natively from the Xianzhou. He was a short-life outworlder who came to the Zhuming on a merchant ship after his homeworld was destroyed by Borison. The boy was taken in by General Huohuo and would become the general's most famous apprentice, at least according to Yunli. Yanqing dedicated himself to learning how to make weapons from an early age, vowing to use the skills he developed to help the Cloud Knights destroy the forces of abundance. Even in the present day, people highly regard him as one of the greatest craftsmen in Xianzhou history. As his talents in forging weapons improved, so too did his ego. The second part of the readable Views of the Universe from a Star Skiff, the Xianzhou Zhuming, has Baihong describe a young Yanqing as shy, yet in Jingliu's fourth character story, and in Bailu's second story, Yanqing is described as exceedingly arrogant. Between him and Yunli, I think overconfidence is a running trait in this found family. We see a bit of Yanqing's arrogance on display when he presented a sword in Jingliu's third character story. The sword sank deep into the ground, leaving only its hilt above the soil. All attendees were shocked. Only the sword champion of the Luofu Cloud Knights can tap into the full potential of this sword I have crafted. He gave a toothy grin. That sword he presented her with back then would become this shard sword he fights with today. In case you're wondering what Yanqing's weapon was before the shard sword, it turns out he didn't have one. To refer to Bailu's second character story again, he didn't fight on the front lines, but instead worked with military engineers to test and perfect giant orangutans. This ties in nicely with the inspiration behind his name. The character is named after Song Yingxing, a Chinese scientist who lived during the Ming Dynasty. He wrote the Tiangong Kaiwu, an encyclopedia that covered a wide variety of technical subjects, including the use of gunpowder weapons. Makes sense to name the character involved with crafting weapons and working on machinery after that guy. Now imagine Blade with a gun. Well, I guess you want to be called Blade then. Unless he had a gunblade! During the time of the High Cloud Quintet, Yanqing would get along pretty well with his teammates. The teammate he seemed to share the closest connection to was Dan Feng. As described in the relic Passerby's Roaming Dragon Bracer, the dragon and the craftsman would not only spar and drink together with the other members, but the two of them would simply gaze at the moon with no words exchanged. If it's to be believed that Yanqing was Dan Feng's closest ally out of the quintet, then it makes sense he'd confide in him for help in trying to revive Bai Hong. However, that attempt to revive their lost comrade would shatter their bond forever. Dan Feng's stubbornness in going through with his plan would end up turning the beloved Bai Hong into a monstrous dragon that almost destroyed Scale Gorge Waterscape. That one event was the equivalent of 10,000 sorrows born from one broken dream. A byproduct of this disaster was Yanqing being struck of a Mara. The exact specifics of how it happened has to do with him being the one to grab and use the flesh of Huohuo to revive Bai Hong. Huohuo was an emanator of abundance. Any direct contact with that path's Eon, yeah sure, even just touching the dead skin of an emanator is enough for someone to develop Mara. According to one of Blade's voice lines, everyone who is Mara struck suffers from it in different ways, though his case is particularly unique. During the quest Desolate Depths of Despair, Xuan has this to say.
The healers believe that the Mara-struck condition is related to memories. Unsurprisingly, long-life species have long lifespans, but there is a limit to the brain's capacity. After centuries and millennia, a long-life species' emotional threshold becomes higher and higher. Simultaneously, their memories fade and become dull under the erosion of time, leaving behind only the most extreme and vivid recollections, which are almost guaranteed to be memories full of anguish and regret. Do you understand now? The fate of all long-life species is to no longer feel joy and happiness, left only with hatred and regret etched into the heart.
Kafka also says something to this effect near the beginning of her companion quest. Mara, according to her, is a madness triggered by the accumulation of emotions and memories. That's why Blade is a weird exception to the rule. It's described in the relic Passerby's rejuvenated wooden hairstick that, quote, his past was shattered into razor-edged shards, and he forgot even his own name. It's shown multiple times that Kafka uses her Spirit Whisper ability to manage Blade's Mara sickness. At the end of that same quest, after successfully suppressing his Mara, she tells Blady to avoid overstimulation and familiar faces. In the lead up to the fight in Dragon's Mislay, Dreams Astray, we get this exchange between the two Stellaron hunters.
That feeling, Kafka. It's welling up within me. That feeling. It's...
Oh, don't resist. Let the Mara strike you.
His Mara flares up when he remembers and or sees people from his past, such as the other High Cloud members. This is especially the case with Dan Heng. After all, it's because of his previous incarnation that he's stuck in this never-ending life. His voice line titled About Self-Demons has him claim he essentially becomes a demon when his Mara flares up. With no pure joy or happiness left to feel, the hatred and resentment he's filled with is aimed directly at Dan Heng as a passionate, vengeful intent to kill. The one who showed no mercy to enemies was you. The one who single-handedly buried the beloved was you. The one who almost led the place called home to its destruction was also you! Blade is a man who was simultaneously rejected by death and infected with life. Dan Heng's second character story describes how Blade has been on the hunt for him, annihilating the spaceships the young dragon previously traveled on. We even see past encounters between Blade and Dan Heng in Blade's trailer and in the Lycon Nowhere to Run. No matter how many times he runs this man through with a spear, the man always comes back. During his time of wandering, Yanqing would encounter Jingliu, who had also been banished from the Xianzhou. Jingliu decided to teach him swordplay, though did it in the most sadistic way possible. She fatally stabbed him thousands of times, but he would always regenerate and be forced to get back up. Jingliu would tell him to remember the feeling of death, and Yanqing would vow to return the favor once his skills were perfected.
As she brandished her sword, phantom pain surged through every part of my body. All because of her.
But the dissimulation of the High Cloud Quartet would not be the end for his story. He would go on to join another group of 5. Kafka and Sam approached the dead man walking, though Yanqing was quick to draw his sword on them. After a brief fight that ended with Sam holding Yanqing in a chokehold, Kafka was able to convince Yanqing to accept Elio's deal. At the end of Kafka's companion mission, Blade tells us that every Stellaron hunter has made a deal with Elio to work under him. In his case, Elio offered to help Blade meet his eternal end. I've intentionally not mentioned it until now, but Blade is heavily, and I mean heavily, associated with red spider lilies. His trailer, many of his combat animations, his splash art, they go everywhere he goes. In many Asian cultures, red spider lilies symbolize death and loss. According to Japanese legends, these lilies supposedly grow from hell and guide spirits through the afterlife and the long journey towards reincarnation. This is the perfect summation of Blade's character. While he has yet to physically die, he did go through a metaphorical death. The legendary craftsman Yanqing has ceased to be. He's become the very kind of abomination he once hated and forged weapons to fight against. In fact, Blade's hands have lost the dexterity they once had, meaning he's incapable of forging another weapon. But none of that mattered to him. From this moment on, that body will be the one and only Blade. Just like how the red spider lily guides souls towards reincarnation, Yanqing was reborn into an empty husk we now know as Blade. I mentioned it in my Firefly analysis, but the Stellaron Hunters are meant to parallel the Astral Express crew, and there's no room for doubt that Blade is the parallel for Dan Heng. I'll touch on Dan Heng's side of this dynamic more when I eventually get to his video, which at the rate I'm going will likely be years from now, but to put it simply, he tried to run away from his past. His character arc during the first Lao Fu story has him learn to embrace his past as Dan Feng while not letting it dictate who he is and will be. Blade is the polar opposite. He's almost completely discarded his past, barely remembering anything unless he sees familiar sights or faces, and he doesn't care what his future is. He doesn't want a future. He wants his existence to end. After an immortal life of never-ending pain and torment, he wants it all to stop. But Blade doesn't want it to end with just him. There's one part of Elio's deal with Blade that I left out when I mentioned it prior. The exact wording of the last 2 paragraphs of the relic lore of passerbys stingy and hiking boots reads as follows. A slave promised to bring an eternal end and a final funeral to the Unnamed's life and to everything he had ever hated. The Unnamed nodded, put his sword back in its sheath, then raced to the next world. If life could be deemed as a continuous journey, then the Unnamed wishes to step over the pool of blood made of all whom he deeply resented before reaching his own end. Of 5 people, 3 must pay the price. We first heard that line from Blade all the way back in 1.0. He only despises one of his fellow sinners. Despite the many fatal wounds she inflicted on him, he doesn't bear nearly as much ill will towards Jingliu as he does Dan Heng. His monologue at the end of Jingliu's companion mission spells it out that he carries a ton of self-hatred.
Why is it that only the abominations can return time and time again? Why does someone like her have to be buried, burned to ash, and eventually forgotten? Why?
Blade can't blame Jingliu for treating him like an abomination of abundance. All he can do is direct that resentment towards the person who turned him into one. Blade won't be fully satisfied with eternal rest unless Dan Feng goes down with him. Only when the dragon who wronged him is gone from this world can he truly accept leaving it for good as well. The dragon who wants to continue living versus the swordsman who seeks oblivion. Two sides of the same immortal coin. Blade is a deeply fascinating character. I always find it interesting when the story tackles concepts of immortality or life in general. And pretty much all of those stories featuring immortality come to similar conclusions that it's the worst. Extremely so if there's only one person who's immortal. You'll outlive everyone you care about and spend eternity being miserable. I think Blade will die by the end of the storyline, probably close to when we go to fight Nanook. Who knows, he might even die by Dan Heng's own hand. I just don't see a version of this story where Blade lives by the end. After everything he's gone through, I think he deserves an everlasting, peaceful rest. Also, he canonically has a driver's license, and my headcanon is that he's the only Stellaron hunter who has one, meaning he's the team's bus driver. Sorry for the jarring tone shift, I just wanted to end this on a lighter note.
What's in your prescription?
The Videodara, a draconic species that descend from Long, the Eon of Permanence. They are biologically immortal. Instead of dying, they go through a reincarnation process every 600 to 700 years. Discarding the memories of their past life to start anew. Each Xianzhou ship has a High Elder for the Videodara. The previous High Elder of the Xianzhou Luofu, the Imbibitor Lunay, was Dan Feng. He would go on to leave a stain in the Videodara's history due to the crimes he committed, and eventually, his next incarnation would be forced into exile. Before he was punished, Dan Feng had already chosen a successor and passed on a fraction of his power to them. That successor was Bailu. Yeah, this silly little dragon girl has a lot more going on than one may first assume. Usually I hold off on the sadder and deeper stuff until later in the analysis, but screw it, this time we're starting with it. Due to her position of High Elder, as well as the sins of her predecessor, she has a lot weighing down on her small shoulders. Before she even hatched, Dan Feng had already chosen her to be the next High Elder. In the companion mission, The Dragon Returns Home, she outright states that she's never wanted the title. We know from Yukong's voice line that Bailu has been worshipped as the High Elder since birth, indicating that Dan Feng chose her when she was an egg. Since she hatched, she's had next to no control over her life. She's under the constant watch of the preceptors, basically bodyguards and educators to young High Elders. According to one of Bailu's voice lines, they don't even let her step out of the house most of the time. The restraint they put her under is represented in her design through the shackles on her tail, which were placed on by the preceptors to prevent her losing control of her powers. Initially, it seems clear the preceptors mean well and only act the way they do to assist Bailu and ensure her safety. This kind of gets thrown out the window with Tao Ran holding her hostage in 2.5, but other than that, they generally have what they believe to be Bailu's best interests in mind. However, Bailu often expresses her frustration at her lack of freedom. If a child does not get to run about, how will it grow tall? Healers who read this case study, when will you release me? I am not some truly wicked ne'er-do-well. Why am I so closely guarded? It makes me very, 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 very angry. The only thing she was free to pursue was her interest in medicine. A lot of the people on the Xianzhou know her as Healer Lady because of her expertise in the medical field. Her unique medical science involves treatments that can only be provided by her draconic race. Although if Xuan is anything to go by, Bailu's treatment can be as simple as having tea with extra sugar to help with fatigue. Yeah, Bailu wants to save and help lives, but she can be a little gremlin at times, which I enjoy. Her healer skills are well known even on other ships of the Xianzhou Alliance, as seen in the Quieting the Quillins, when Feixiao thanks Lingsha for getting her a meeting with Bailu.
Sorry, but even a general needs to pay their bills. We don't do credit here. let's not forget, you'd have been waiting decades for a chance to see the Dragon Lady if it weren't for me.
The fact that people from other ships know of Bailu's healing prowess and there's such a high demand for a consultation is crazy. Like, the Alchemy Commission in general is all about medicine, right? But it speaks volumes. Everyone seeks out Bailu specifically if they're able to meet with her. Let's just hope this supreme level of renown doesn't lead to her developing gifted kid syndrome later in life. She's pretty similar to Yanqing in that way. Despite their high level of skill in their respective fields, they're still children in terms of Xianzhou ages. They hate being treated like children and want to be treated like adults. Bailu is one of the youngest Xianzhou characters we've met so far, and I can't help but feel that her wanting to be treated more like an adult is in some part due to the massive responsibilities she has to uphold. She's set to be bestowed the title of Imbiber Lunae once she goes through the coming of age ceremony. Maybe she feels if she's treated like an adult and given the freedom of one now, she'd have a better handle of everything that comes with her high position of power. For as often as other characters remark on her medical prowess, they just as often talk about her age and how hard it must be as the High Elder. It's especially hard for her as the full power wasn't transferred to her. There was an error during the transfer, causing the High Elder power to be split between Danhong and Bailu.
The High Elder succession was incomplete, causing her to become trapped in shallow waters. Fortunately, she has a vitality that does not bend to the will of others.
Bailu is constantly sneaking out of the Alchemy Commission. While there are cases of her using her status as a doctor as an excuse to sneak out on her own, like we see at the start of her companion mission, the rest of that quest shows how she became a doctor out of the genuine desire to help others. If there's someone in need of her assistance, she'll help them no matter what it takes. Bailu cannot bear to see people suffer, and that's why you'll see her with her eyes shut tightly as she cures ailments. That sentence in her character details is the explanation behind why her skill is RNG healing, because she isn't looking at her injured teammates when she uses it. I don't know, I just found that to be a cute detail. Bai can be read as white or blank, while Lu means dew. The dew is meant to connect to her water motif, and the first half of her name could connect to her unique medical expertise as her healing is almost magical. She's a white mage. What I mean to say is that she's a white mage. There you go. In real-world China, the word Bailu is used to refer to the 15th Chinese solar term out of 24. That solar term specifically spans from early to late September. During this solar term, the Mid-Autumn Festival is held. It's a harvest festival where one thing people do to celebrate is light lanterns that symbolize beacons of good fortune. You can see Bailu's efforts as healer lady as providing good fortune to her clients. Dragon dancing is also performed during the festival. Bailu is a dragon, so you know, there's that too. The festival is held on a night where the moon can be seen at its brightest and fullest. Due to this, it's also known as the Moon Festival, and one of the food items sold during the festival are mooncakes. The festival is also based on the legend of the Chinese moon goddess Shangyi. The title of Imbiber Lunae can be directly translated from Latin to mean drinker of the moon, so it's a very fitting title for a character whose name connects them to the Moon Festival.
But wait! There's more!
As mentioned earlier, Bailu was appointed as the next High Elder when she was an egg. Why in the hell would Don Feng choose Bailu as his successor before she even hatched? Well, it's heavily implied in multiple companion missions that Bailu is the reincarnation of Bai Heng, the member of the High Cloud Quintet, whose death led to the group's disbandment. Remember, Don Feng and Yingqing's method of reviving Bai Heng turned her into a draconic beast. Dragons in the HSR universe have the capability to regenerate through reincarnation. So it's not impossible that after Jingliu slayed the beast, an egg emerged from its remains that would become Bailu. Bailu and Bai Heng also have the same hair and eye colors. On top of that, the Bai in both names is spelled with the same symbol. I highly doubt this is a coincidence. The Don in Don Feng and Don Heng is spelled the same between them. So we already have an example of a Videodora carrying the same surname or same part of a name across incarnations. So yeah, Bai Heng got to live on in a way through Bailu. Now imagine Bailu getting invited to the High Cloud Quintet reunion during Jingliu's mission. She would stick out like a sore thumb, not gonna lie. Everything we've analyzed about Bailu shows she's a pretty deep character, worthy of her 5-star status. It's great then that she only shows up twice in the Luofu's entire Trailblaze mission questline. I wish I was joking. After your short first encounter with her in Star Spun, Prescient Sprung, she disappears until you're saying goodbye to everyone. Most of her screen time comes from companion missions. I'm sure that with Talron's introduction into the narrative, Bailu will gain more importance in the main plot going forward, but still, it's weird how a 5-star character shows up for like half a minute and then dips out for the rest of the plot. Sorry for the tangent, let's get back on track. This little dragon girl is pure of heart, but is shackled by the pressure placed on her, both figuratively and literally. Her healer lady status allows her to briefly escape that pressure and help the people of the Xianzhou. But even then, the amount of people who seek her out for her healing expertise and regard her highly for it must also put pressure on her. All those expectations are not healthy for a kid like her to handle. I have the hope that as she grows older, she'll have an easier time carrying and managing such great responsibility. I have no doubt that in due time, she will be a great imbiber Lunae for the Videodora. But on the flip side, she does have a point. She should be able to enjoy her years of youth to the fullest before they run out.
The truth burns clear as a flame.
Meet Lingsha, the new cauldron master of the Alchemy Commission, and the Xianzhou Alliance's best aromatherapist. Her appearance in the War Dance quest was actually a return home for her. As she describes in her voice line about her background, she was born and raised in the Luocha, but for the past 30 years lived in the Juming with her mentor, Yunhua. Lingsha is very straightforward, rarely mincing words. Behind her soft, composed smile is an extremely sharp tongue. This dragon woman is often upfront and honest to a brutal extent. We see this clear as day in her interaction with Scott when she first appears in the story.
Normally, it'll only take around 47 star calendar years.
Only 47 years?
Why so surprised? You're still young and full of energy. I'm pretty sure you'll live a few more decades. Have some confidence in yourself. Sure thing, Mr. Scott. You seem pretty confident that your career and life will last long enough to witness this victory unfold.
I have a soft spot for characters like this who just speak their mind without any kind of sugarcoating. Lingsha is my favorite variation of this trope, where the brutal honesty is in juxtaposition with a gentle demeanor, like Haru from Persona 5. This isn't to say her caring demeanor is just for gags. We'll touch on how genuinely kind she is later in the analysis. Another important trait of Lingsha's characterization is her fixation on scents. Go into her voice lines and you'll notice that she brings up the smell of a character pretty consistently. And no, it's never an actual smell she's referring to, like, oh, Tingyun has a nice lavender fragrance, the perfume Miss Feixiao uses is lovely, and March 7th just radiates fruitiness. No, she uses the terms scent and smell, in these instances at least, to describe a character's general vibe. Yanqing's purity, Huohuo's sensitivity, and Yukong's sorrow, just to name a few. These voice lines contextualize Lingsha has been a rather excellent judge of character, picking up on the subtlest of details and how people around her act. This isn't to say her manner of speaking is nothing more than a fun quirk. Her character details confirm she does possess a keen sense of smell, which comes in quite handy with her aromatherapy. We see in her first character story how even as a kid, her sense of smell helped Yunhua diagnose patients and give them the right medication. Despite being a character who so far we have yet to meet on screen, Yunhua is vital to fully understanding Lingsha. Yunhua was like a mother figure to little Lingsha, back when she went by Danju. Yunhua gave her pearls of wisdom about being a healer in the Alchemy Commission, such as teaching her that healers should spend every day working hard and being loyal to their duties. Their strong mother-daughter-like bond is why after Yunhua was exiled from the Luofu and moved to the Juming, Danju went with her. After all, according to her second character story, the years that she spent studying under Yunhua were the most fulfilling and joyous of her life. Her reaction to Yunhua's exile does highlight another key aspect of her character. She will always stand up to injustice. condemning people for their crimes or prove people innocent of false accusations. This trait of hers is the central focus of her third character story, where she was exposed to the different afflictions of humanity, like greed and hypocrisy, and did her part to thwart any evil schemes she picked up on. We also see this near the end of the War Dance storyline, where she gets fed up with Tao Run after he confesses to being the mastermind behind everything. Even when she was a young girl, she still tried her hardest to plead her master's case. Her voice line about Yunhua is a great summation of this character trait. She still believes her kind master was framed by criminals and that you must not harbor any goodwill towards villains. She also brings up her master in her voice line about Jingliu.
My master and General Jingliu have an unpleasant history with each other. But personal grudges are a luxury that adults cannot afford.
That last bit, personal grudges are a luxury that adults can't afford, is funny for her to say because she's being a bit hypocritical herself. When you look back at her interactions with Jingliu during A Web of Pasts Rewoven, she makes a few targeted comments towards him.
But I guess I understand. The people of the Luofu are known for their kindness. Even when faced with a malignant tumor within the Alchemy Commission, they couldn't bring themselves to cut it out. Instead, they exiled the healer, who tried to solve the problem, to the Xianzhou Juming. Thank you for enlightening me. Was it for the same reason that you traded off my mentor to the Xianzhou Juming, only to stand idle and allow the resurgence of the disciples of Sanctus Medicus?
Again, we're seeing that brutal honesty at play, and she is tearing into the general. But this leads to a wake-up call for the new Cauldron Master, as Jingliu reveals Yunhua wasn't a purely innocent soul. She was exiled for using forbidden healing on Dan Heng after his rebirth, making him regain Dan Feng's memories. And while Lingsha did catch on from an early age, there was a bigger conspiracy behind her mentor's exile. Her love for her mentor blinded her from suspecting that she intentionally played a part in what led to her banishment. Jingliu specifically says Yunhua herself believed what she did was for the betterment of the Vidyadhara. Although she does acknowledge her mentor's crimes and thanks Jingliu for protecting her by only issuing an exile, her voice lines still show she holds her master in high regard. She still sees Yunhua as a kind, open soul, and with all the years they spent together, with Lingsha willingly letting herself get banished to the Juming with her master, it's no wonder she wants to think Yunhua is a good person at heart. Speaking of the Juming, that was where Lingsha studied different types of medical treatments, including aromatherapy. She practices the piercing gaze art of healing she learned from Ardens Regia, the High Elder of the Juming, and she does so using the incense burner that doubles as her weapon, the ruby tendrils. As she learned such healing arts and used incense to dispel the illnesses of humanity, she chose to take on the name Lingsha. Her name connects to her occupation. Lingsha is the term used for a powder form of mercury sulfide, a substance used in traditional Chinese alchemy and medicine. It's produced through heating mercury and sulfur together, which is likely why they made her a fire-type character. Plus, mercury and sulfur are two of the three heavenly substances of alchemy, which is why she took on the name Lingsha when choosing a name that represented her dedication to learning the hearts of man. Her medicinal namesake's fluctuation of yin and yang, its properties of both water and fire, make it a miracle cure to those in mortal danger, just as she herself wished to become. As mentioned earlier, her real name is Dan Zhu. Dan means red or cinnabar, while Zhu means vermilion. Yes, her full legal name is just different shades of red, just to really hammer home how burning incense is like her main characteristic. Off topic, but when I first heard the name of the drip marketing, I got her confused with Dan Shu, the Sanctus Medicus lady who was part of those quests that were cut out of the main story. But no, it's just a nearly identical name. There is another Hoyoverse character who has also gone by the name Dan Zhu. Lingsha is another Honkai XP. The character she's based on is Nua from HI3. That character is named after a goddess in Chinese myth, the creator of humanity, who's often associated with fertility and order. She's commonly depicted as half human and half snake or dragon. Makes sense that in a game where dragon people exist, a character in part inspired by Nua would be one of them. And Nua's ties to order may be why Lingsha gets so stressed out correcting the flaws of the Alchemy Commission, now that she's Cauldron Master. She was quick to recognize the issues the Commission was facing and ways to counteract or fix them. However, her hyper-focusing on fixing these problems has left her quite irritable. In her signature light cone, she needs to ignite a soothing incense for herself just so she can relax on vacation. All this stress ended up reminding her of Yunhua. The waves still sounded outside her window. As she watched the rising and falling of the ocean, she thought about how Yunhua must have spent her days like this back then. Master, continuing to practice and learn in the face of the burdens of human affairs is no simple matter. That young girl whose face was blackened by the exploding elixir crucible is now a grown woman, drowning in work and petty squabbles. Lingsha is a fun character. She's always had an interest in the arts of healing since she was a little girl, and had a great mentor to follow the example of as a Cauldron Master. She's grown into a mature woman who tries her best to not hold grudges and fulfill her duties as a healer. While she doesn't play a huge role in the war dance, her presence was very much welcome, and I'm sure she'll get more screen time on her next revisit to the Luofu. When we see her again, hopefully we get more insight into her bond with her teacher. Also, there was no other place to put this, so I'm ending off the video with this. Pink Bunny go burr.
I'm honored by your presence. I'm honored by your presence.
Mon cuistot, tous mes bons plats se mangent bien chaud. Tu es de trop, crois-moi, tu es pas si costaud. La tension monte, direction d'innombrables trésors. Ouvert leur
Jiaoqiu, one of the retainers of the Merlin's Claw, Feixiao, a healer whose medicine comes in the form of finely cooked meals. But he's a character who has his eyes shut most of the time, so you know there's a lot of ingredients to this little fox guy that are simmering under the surface. Or maybe we should believe Bailu in that he's constantly squinting in pain from all the spicy food he eats. Well, okay, in actuality, him having his eyes closed was a bit of foreshadowing for him going blind by the end of the War Dance storyline, which, I'll admit, I didn't see coming. That is a good twist, and we will touch on this later on in the video. Before becoming Feixiao's retainer and personal medic, he was born into a prestigious alchemy commission family and went to the Ranji school, which specializes in food therapy, according to Jiaoqiu during March to Mastery. In his following conversations with Yunli, he is adamant that he is a healer and not the general's cook. The way Mark Whitten delivers the lines has some I'm not Zera energy, and as a Gintama fan, that just makes me so happy.
Need I repeat myself again? I'm a healer.
He clearly has talent in this field, being the inventor of 9 Square Grid, a cauldron-based medicinal formula that's easy to make and provides wondrous effects. His mentor even compliments him for coming up with it in a day, according to his first character story. His voice lines about the arts of healing and cooking are also very telling of his philosophy on culinary medicine. Cooking is medicine, and to make medicine is to cook. Insert Breaking Bad cooking reference here. The Jiao in Jiaoqiu can be read to mean pepper or spices, while the second part of his name, Qiu, means hill. His name obviously ties into his culinary preferences, wanting everything to be spicy. Interestingly enough, his taste buds weren't always this obsessed with spiciness. In his first character story, he eats a meal that he considered so sweet and refreshing, it delights the palate. However, in his fourth character story, he has that meal again, but has this to say, ugh, too bland. His change in taste buds is actually explained in his third character story. After Lan wiped out the denizens of abundance during the Third Abundance War, Jiaoqiu used any leftover ingredients he had to feed himself and his fellow survivors. However, he felt cold from the inside out, and the food wasn't helping. He kept adding spice after spice until he could finally pick up on the extremely hot taste. He felt alive for the first time. It was a sensation that bordered on pain. It's possible his alteration in palate is an indication that he developed post-traumatic stress disorder. It has been documented that PTSD can cause changes in a person's sense of taste or an outright loss of it. This specific occurrence is known as post-traumatic gustatory dysfunction. But that's not all we can decipher from his name. The word Jiaoqiu appears in the Chinese poem Li Sao by Qu Yuan. The poem's name means encountering sorrow. It is a piece of, hold on, let me check here, political erotic writing describing the poet's disappointment in his lord through a romantic allegory. Politics and eroticism were two things I never thought would go together, but hey, what do I know? The part that features the characters that are used for Jiaoqiu's name is the following excerpt. I will walk my horse on the orchard meadow and gallop on the pepper hill to rest. I will not go forward to avoid blame, but will not go back to wear my original clothes. When connecting this to Jiaoqiu, this line can be seen in how his character story loops back around. After the war, he went back to Rainsour Lake and continued his culinary habits, but without being a healer. He saw it as a futile effort after all the bloodshed and death he witnessed. In the never-ending war between the forces of the Hunt and the Abundance, Jiaoqiu would continuously see less and less soldiers return from the battlefield and gather around his cauldron of culinary medicine. You know, during March to Mastery, he says Yanqing and Yunli remind him of old friends and old tales. The really sad and probably the most likely interpretation of this line is that those old friends are 6 feet under and just, ouch, my heart! In his second character story, he admitted his doubts to the general of the Yaoqing at the time, Huohuo. Recently, I've been thinking, if the patients that I nurse back to health are destined to hurtle toward death once more, what is my purpose as a healer? Even in the present-day storyline, we see that those doubts are still present.
He's getting away. Do something, Jiaoqiu. It's just like the old days, you useless loser. Just do something!
Regardless of those insecurities, there is one patient he has dedicated himself fully to and is unwilling to give up on. The very general he works for, Feixiao. In his fourth character story, Jiaoqiu's former master selected the pink-haired Foxian to be Feixiao's personal healer. Jiaoqiu was initially resistant to the role, but his teacher insisted. You misunderstand me. This time I'm not here to persuade you to heal the masses in this world. I'm here because I want this general to heal your despondent heart. She will tell you what the true purpose of a healer is. We see in the quest, The Red War Cry, that Jiaoqiu first met Feixiao when she was on death's door during the Third Abundance War. She fought desperately and brutally to ensure the soldiers and medics got out alive. Back then, he was perplexed as to why soldiers would put their lives on the line over and over again, no matter how many times he healed them. He wondered what the point of him being there was, as his healing seemingly only prolonged their inevitable deaths. But then Feixiao talks about her goal of ending all war.
You healers work yourselves to the bone to save people, even though there will always be sickness and death. So we will also keep fighting. I cannot speak for the dead, but I know that General Huohuo, as well as all the warriors that never returned from battle, will not have died in vain.
I'll touch on this more in Feixiao's video, but Feixiao and Jiaoqiu are alike in that they are very selfless people. Feixiao wants to cure war to ensure nobody dies in the blasts of Lan's arrows, while Jiaoqiu vowed to follow the order given to him by Feixiao and find some means of curing her illness. The general's philosophy and goals opened Jiaoqiu's eyes. She healed his heart and soul, exactly like his teacher said she would. From his treasured patient, Jiaoqiu learned that there is as much value to find in death as there is in life. Just because someone he treated died doesn't invalidate the healing he provided.
Everything I'm doing now, following you so closely, is just for one reason. Witnessing your death with my own 2 eyes. Even your death has value. It will pave the way for a peaceful war dance and a fully cured Feixiao.
Moze also describes in one of his voice lines that Jiaoqiu is as much Feixiao's patient as he is her doctor. To put it in layman's terms, Jiaoqiu is a physical healer and Feixiao is a therapist. And a damn good one at that, apparently. Like, where is she on BetterHelp? We can see just how far he's willing to go to ensure the betterment of Feixiao's condition in the climax of the quest. He poisoned himself with tumble dust before Huohuo drank his blood, hoping it would save innocent lives. And that it did. Huohuo tore the crimson moon out of his body and died. Feixiao consumed that moon before it affected any Foxians in the area. And while it hasn't changed her condition, her doubts are gone, and the moon could help increase her lifespan down the line. All of that came at the cost of his eyesight, but he doesn't mind one bit so long as Feixiao has gotten even the tiniest bit better. I believe Jingliu gives a very succinct summary of Jiaoqiu's character in his voice line about him.
The way I see it, he was always a healer. It's just that ordinary healers focus on one patient at a time, while he wanted to cure the ailments of all the people on the Xianzhou.
Jiaoqiu has a bleeding heart. It's in his nature to help people whenever possible. There was a time he found his efforts pointless in a cosmos of endless conflict, but through Feixiao, he learned life and death complete each other, and both sides of the coin can hold equal value. Because of that, his healing practices and sacrifices will always be important. It's a really interesting arc I don't typically see healer characters go through, and I'm glad the writers were able to pull it off as well as they did. And hopefully Feixiao will eventually repay his kindness and heal his eyes. Hey, just wanted to chime in and say we're halfway through this compilation video. Thanks for watching this far in. Before we continue, if you've enjoyed what you've seen so far, please like the video and subscribe. Perhaps even leave a comment telling me who your favorite Xianzhou character is and why. As a smaller content creator, every interaction with my videos helps me a ton. Okay, with the shameless plugging out of the way, let's continue.
I venture forth to hunt.
The Merlin's Claw of the Yaoqing, General Feixiao. Despite only having been a general for at most 30 years, she has accomplished a ton and has wiped out a multitude of abominations with the Verdant Knights by her side. She was pretty much the star of the show in the new Xianzhou questline, especially in the second half. All this to say, I've been very much excited to get to her video and dissect her character. Upon her stellar entrance into the story, the prominent personality trait you'll pick up from Feixiao's character is her charming level of confidence. She interrupts the fight between Yanqing and Yunli by grabbing their swords with a couple fingers each. And then the two kids recognize her as the Vanquishing General. However, she prefers the quote-unquote humble nickname she gave herself, the Lacking General, as in she's lacking in worries, regrets, and rivals. Meanwhile, most of the game's player base is lacking in bit. Even after we learn about her chronic illness and her tragic background, she still keeps up this confident and positive demeanor. And this isn't a case where she's putting up a facade to mask how depressed she really feels. She's genuinely cheerful and does her best to not let her setbacks weigh her down. In that sense, she's a remarkable leader deserving of her accolades. It makes sense she'd be such a good leader when she used to follow around the previous general of the Yaoqing, Yueyu. Yueyu could certainly be read as a mother figure for Feixiao. She gave her successor her name, taught her language and how to fight, and provided her with a much more comfortable way of life. Feixiao wouldn't be the woman she is today if it weren't for the former general's kindness. Unfortunately, Yueyu would die in the Third Abundance War, leading Feixiao to take up her mentor's mantle from then onward. The Xianzhou Yaoqing is known to be ruthless and aggressive in their pursuit of the Abominations of Abundance, taking out more of their forces than any other Xianzhou ship in the Alliance. Feixiao's almost non-stop hunting of abominations is explained in a couple lines from her during the quieting of Quillians.
Upon starting my military career, I made a pledge that the rest of my life would be dedicated to being the Xianzhou's spearhead, hunting down the abominations of abundance till the end of my days. As long as I can fulfill that deep-seated desire, I don't care how long I live.
But what if I told you the reason she has such a deep interest in taking on the forces of abundance is because of her close ties to them? We come to learn during the continuance questline that the condition Feixiao suffers from is moon rage. Moon rage is the name for the Borisans' shape-shifting abilities. It's a painful process that involves them morphing and twisting their bones and muscle structures to achieve a new appearance. Lingsha describes it as a uncontrollable insanity. Foxians and Borisans share a common ancestor, resulting in rare cases of Foxians developing moon rage. However, that case is a lot more common for Foxians from the Yaoqing, as their DNA is more genetically akin to Borisans than the Foxians from other ships. The reason for this is described in the Wind-Soaring Valorous relic set. There were multiple planets ruled by Borisan where the Foxians were enslaved. The Yaoqing and its Verdant Knights would save the Foxians from their Borisan overlords and let them take refuge on their ship. The Foxians from these so-called fallen territories had mixed Foxian Borisan blood, and Feixiao is one of those mixed breeds. In fact, her Borisin blood derives from the same pack as Huohuo, the current warhead of the Borisin. Her close relation to the common ancestor Duran is reiterated throughout 2.5's story as part of the reason why Feixiao is so powerful. With that in mind, it was inevitable she would develop Moon Rage. However, she inherited the weaker regenerative attributes from her Foxian side, meaning all her Moon Rage does is chronically damage her lifespan and psyche, until she eventually snaps and becomes no different from the abominations she's pledged to hunt down. That's why her drip marketing ends with the following line: if she were to hunt down all the abominations in her limited lifetime, then the only enemy Feixiao has would be herself. Because if she wants to destroy every single monster in the cosmos, she'd eventually have to be destroyed too, whether by her own hand or by the arrow of her Eon.
On the battlefield, she will be overpowered by her ever-intensifying moon rage, and finally be torn apart by her fury and transformation.
This might be why her official title is the Merlin's Claw. A Merlin is a small dark falcon that hunts small birds, found throughout most of Eurasia and North America. She's compared to an avian hunting other avians, which does go in line with how she hunts down Borisin while having Borisin blood in her veins. While on the topic of titles, her self-proclaimed title of the Lacking General may be a double entendre, hinting at some sort of self-loathing. She's lacking in weaknesses, sure, but also feels she lacks the pristine qualities necessary to be an Arbiter General. Huohuo was obviously weaponizing her doubts against her to make himself sound convincing, but these are still feelings she bears. She's scared of being deemed as a dangerous threat to the Xianzhou and treated and seen no differently than Borisin. It's not like her fears are entirely unfounded either. When she experienced Moon Rage for the first time, she effortlessly and swiftly took out a multitude of enemies by herself. When she came back to her senses, she looked back at the bloodbath she left in her wake. The Yanqing soldiers are looking at her from a distance, their eyes filled with surprise, admiration, and also fear. Later on, we hear the other soldiers conflicted on how to feel, as they're grateful to Feixiao for winning the battle and saving them, but are also scared of her. This is where her parallels to Huohuo come into play. I believe Huohuo is a pretty good villain, and the scene between him and Feixiao in her mind is the perfect showcase of why he works as an antagonist. He gave up the Crimson Moon that was his heart, sacrificing himself knowing Feixiao would take it and succeed him. And what he says to her during this is interesting. His attempt to simply take over her body was his plan B. His plan A was to convince her to accept her newfound status as the Borisin warhead, specifically saying she'd be free to do whatever she wanted. She can enslave the Borisin, make them peacefully coexist with the Foxians, or continue hunting them down. She was free to become a legendary hero or a feared villain. And while true freedom sounds great, Feixiao doesn't accept the offer. You see, Huohuo is right in that the two were both born for war and will die for war, but it's why they'll die for war that divides them. Huohuo values himself above all else, taking glory in the freedom and power granted by being the warhead. He sees war as a means to fight for his freedom and make more of the cosmos his hunting ground. But Feixiao doesn't want that freedom all to herself. Ever since she was a kid, chasing after the Lux arrows in the sky, thinking they were shooting stars, Feixiao not only wished to be free, but share that freedom with her brethren. A wish she was unfortunately unable to fulfill, as the war camp she came from would be reduced to a bottomless pit by the Eon's arrow. To this very day, she continues holding on to her desire to grant freedom to all those still suffering under the thumb of Borisin. She's willing to die for war in order to end it. The Fei in Feixiao means to fly, while Xiao means firmament, as in heavens or the sky. The Xianzhou Yanqing has a lot of connections to imagery of wind and the sky, so this is an extremely fitting name for that ship's general. And it also ties into her greatest wish, to move faster than Lan's Lux arrows. She's made it her mission to prevent any more fallen territories from being wiped out by those shooting stars. She wants to save the helpless people on those planets through less destructive means. It's also in this scene that we see something visually noteworthy. During her confrontation with Huohuo, we see this shot of Lan appear. The framing of the Eon of the hunt should look familiar, as the game has used this exact framing for other Eons when they gazed upon the Trailblazer and they unlocked their multiple paths. It happened with Nanook, Klapoth, Qingque, but when we get to Lan's version of this shot, it's with Feixiao. But as far as we know, guardian spirits like Lightning Lord are signifiers that someone is an emanator of the hunt. Feixiao had her spiritus in the Flying Aurora, so she was an emanator already prior to this scene. So what was the point of showing Lan here? Well, when the three Eons gazed down on the Trailblazer, they didn't become an emanator of any of those paths. So I think the same applies to Feixiao and Lan. In this scene, Lan is acknowledging her resolve, recognizing how she upholds the truest values of their path, dedicating oneself to hunting down evil at any cost. It's also possibly them accepting her challenge to one day move faster than their arrows. If there's anything we've learned from Feixiao's time in the story so far, it's that she's a brave, heroic soul. She suffers from a deadly illness and lots of insecurities, but is able to hold herself with a level of confidence that doesn't feel forced. The way she manages to feel authentically cheerful, even with all the negativity and tragedy in her life, is honestly pretty inspirational. Her power and attitude are that of a legend in the making. No matter what her doubts may tell her, she is very deserving of the position of Arbiter General. If anyone could become capable of flying faster than a god's arrow, it's definitely this Master of Combat. And I'll be rooting for her the entire way there. Okay, serious time over. Just one chance, ma'am. That's all I'm asking for. Please, I'm begging you!
The wind is rising.
Madame Yukong, the Helm Master of the Skyfaring Commission and one of the Luofu's 6 charioteers. Even before working on these videos, I've noticed how relatively few people in the community talk about Yukong. She's unfortunately one of many 4-star characters in this game that often get overlooked. That's a shame because Yukong is one of my favorite Xianzhou characters, so I'm happy I get the chance to make this video analyzing her. As said in Hanya's voice line about Yukong, the lifespan for Foxians is only 300 years. Yukong is the oldest playable Foxian from the Luofu, being 246 years old. What a gilf, am I right? 4-star Tingyun's 4th character story states the Skyfaring Commission has always been run by ace pilots, and Yukong is no exception. She's a seasoned Starskiff pilot with a ton of achievements to her name. But she didn't start off that way. Yukong used to be a delinquent teenager who was a total nuisance flying around on a Starskiff, with her most notorious misdemeanor being how she ran 6 red lights in a row. To be fair to her though, even with that, she's still a better driver than most people in LA. In her first character story, General Jingliu saw a ton of potential in her piloting skills. He wanted Yukong to join the Skyfaring Commission since he thought she'd be a perfect Xuan. I don't blame him for thinking that, as even her name connects to her time as a pilot. The U means to control or drive, and Kong translates to air or sky. To drive around the stars in the sky. That was what Yukong was born to do, yet she refuses to take flight ever again. What caused her to focus solely on official duties for the remainder of her life stems from the events of one battle, the Third Abundance War. Forces from multiple Xianzhou ships fought together against the denizens of Abundance. This battle would result in drastic casualties on both sides. According to the readable Record of Rainbow's Road, it's documented that the Luofu in particular lost over 63,000 fighter jets and over 120,000 pilots. This war would have an impact on Yukong going forward. In every battle she took part in, she would always make a promise to her teammates. You just worry about holding on to your weapon. I'll bring you back to Xianzhou. However, that battle was the first and only time she couldn't keep that promise. Many of her fellow pilots died on that battlefield. After she returned to the Skyfaring Commission by her lonesome, she decided to abandon her position as a pilot and focus solely on clearing through paperwork. The specific wording of only her return to the commission implies she was the sole pilot from the Luofu who survived the war. Now that I say that out loud, I think maybe I should have used a different Guilty Gear song for the intro. Out of those 120,000 deaths, there was one woman who was particularly important to Yukong, the ace gunner who completed the ace fighter pilot, Xueyi. They had been friends since childhood, illegally racing against each other in their starskiffs. Remember how I said Yukong was brought before Jingliu, who decided to enlist her into the commission? Well, based on what Yukong says in her companion mission, For I Have Touched the Sky, Xueyi was right there with her. Xueyi would die in Yukong's arms. Her last words were a request to her best friend.
Don't let Jingliu walk the same path. Don't let her become a fighter pilot.
Yukong would adopt Qingque, claiming she was her birth mother and hiding the identity of Xueyi from her. When Qingque gained an interest in becoming a star skiff pilot, Yukong staunchly forbade her from doing so. She was adamant that her adopted daughter would not join the commission. And honestly, can you blame Yukong for this? She already broke one promise to all her comrades. She wasn't willing to break another one, especially when it was the dying wish of someone near and dear to her heart. Yukong is closely associated with imagery of kites, such as her profile picture in the Ghostly Grove event. In her 4th character story, it's stated that in Xianzhou culture, kites are mementos of fallen pilots. Take good care of them, let them take off once more in place of those pilots who cannot return to the sky. The kite that Yukong holds in one of her idol animations is a memento of Xueyi. The light cone past and future's illustration has Yukong holding onto the same kite. We know it's the same one because of the burn marks. And there's something interesting in the light cone's short story. The wings of the paper kite in her hands were broken, brutally reminding her of her beloved's tragic passing. Her beloved, Psst. Hey, Yukong. I know what you are. Yeah, from this and how Yukong wrote to Xueyi in their letters, you get the vibe there was definitely something more going on. I checked with my lesbian friends and they told me that having a crush on your straight friend can be a pretty common experience. Imagine watching the person you love die in your arms. That would be rough for anybody to go through. And as her 4th character story reveals, she can't stop thinking about the past and has nightmares of the battlefield where Xueyi and the other pilots perished.
My dream. That was the day I died.
When she wakes up from those nightmares of dying alongside everyone else, she feels desperately compelled to return to the sky and complete the final flight of her life. This could be interpreted as her feeling like she doesn't deserve to live while everyone else died. So, to top it off, Yukong has survivor's guilt too. Like, Jesus Christ, can this lady catch a break? Alternatively, you can interpret this line as her hope that if she can choose how she dies, she wants it to be piloting a star skiff, but the death she wants is now unattainable. She's helmmaster, she has a ton of paperwork to do, and she's a mother. Yukong has a lot tying her down to the ground. Since Foxians live pretty short lives compared to other Xianzhou natives, they tend to have a deeper appreciation and passion for life. After losing so many comrades, including her beloved, to the flames of war, Yukong has an even greater appreciation of life than most Foxians. The running theme of her entire character lore is how she's getting old. She only has a little over 50 years left to live. And while Foxians maintain a youthful appearance, as they grow older, they lose a sense of enjoyment from their hobbies or pastimes. This is our deterioration. This is the deterioration of all Xianzhou natives. Yukong is, for my money, one of the most underrated characters in Honkai Star Rail. Her story quest made me shed actual tears by the end of it. No joke, her flashback with Xueyi messed me up. Her story is beautifully tragic, with her carrying so much guilt and pain alone for so long. To see her finally stop bottling it up and express her pain to someone was a great moment for her character, and I'm glad that the end of this quest has her support her daughter's decision and help her join the Skyfaring Commission to one day become the next ace pilot. Yukong is legitimately a great mom, and I will not accept any slander of her in the comments. While not part of Yukong's companion mission, there's a scene with her during one of the Luocha myth quests that acts as a sort of epilogue. Here, Yukong encounters and talks to a heliobi that's taking the form of Xueyi and possesses her memories. Through this ghostly doppelganger, Yukong is able to have one last chat with her former partner. And the lines she says here are actually really good. But I must not stay stagnant in this moment. I want to move on with my life while holding on to my memories of you. Your daughter, no, our daughter, Qingque, is doing very well now. No hyperbole, this little exchange, straight up, shattered my heart into pieces. Yukong is such a great character, and I'm glad I got this chance to talk about her. Hopefully through watching this video, you guys gained a stronger appreciation for this old fox and her story.
All things in this world have their laws. Yet stratagems, constellations, are human creations!
Say what you want about Fu Xuan, but I think we can all agree she makes one hell of an entrance in the story. While we first see a hologram of her talking to Jingliu, she makes her proper debut, deflecting Kafka's bullets while walking through the air. Like, come on. That's fucking sick. But like pretty much every character in this game, there's more to Fu Xuan than the rule of cool. She's the head of the ship's divination commission. They handle processing and preserving information, being in charge of libraries and the like. Their primary task, on the other hand, is to use Jade Abacus technology to predict the future and chart their respective ship's course. Jing Yuan's title among the Arbiter Generals is the Divine Foresight. While he could have gotten the moniker solely for his strategic planning, it can be interpreted he also got the title because he's the general who relies on and works with the Divination Commission the most. His title can indicate his level of trust in Fu Xuan's predictions, indicated by multiple moments in the story, as well as during Fu Xuan's past that I'll touch on later. And while she's always willing to help, you can definitely tell she's gotten sick of him.
Am I coming up with a plan again?
Of course. I'm sure you have a countermeasure at the ready, Master Diviner.
General?
Well?
You're a scoundrel.
As seen in the quest devising stratagems, Fu Xuan has also been quick to express her desire for Jing Yuan to retire so she could become the next general of the Luofu. Hell, even her character details reads as follows. Fu Xuan is waiting for the general's promised abdication. However, that day still seems very far away. She really is the type of person who's mutuals with someone and gets along with them alright, but also has written an entire cancel thread on them ready to drop at any moment. Very specific example, I know. The Commission's exact method of fortune telling mainly involves Jade Abacus technology like the Matrix of Prescience Ultima. This brand of technology is essentially a bunch of supercomputers that were inspired by Nous, the Eon of erudition. They record information of current events and then use that info to predict future outcomes. While there is some room for error due to events outside that recorded data, the method is still highly regarded for being super accurate a majority of the time. For those who watched my analysis on Black Swan, you've probably noticed this method of fortune telling goes in line with the Memo Keeper's philosophy that the present and future are fully influenced by and can be predicted through past events. I doubt there is any connection between the Divination Commission and Black Swan, but I found it interesting how the Jade Abacus method complements that outlook. The Fu in Fu Xuan means sign or talisman, and Xuan means mysterious. Her name connects to her role as Master Diviner, peering into the mysterious future and giving others signs of what's to come. The second reading of Fu, that being talisman, can also connect to her character. Talismans are objects that are thought to be magical and bring good fortune to those in possession of them. One notable talisman is the Nazar, an amulet in the shape of an eye that is meant to protect the wearer and ward off evil. Fu Xuan's in-game kit revolves around her protecting her teammates by taking a majority of the damage intended for them, which you can view as her serving as a talisman for your team to ward off harm. I also think the Nazar might have served as an inspiration for Fu Xuan's character because of her relation to eye imagery. The gemstone in her forehead is called a third eye in the game, and she has this to say in her voice line about this third eye of hers.
The eye on my forehead is a treasure from beyond the heavens bestowed on me by Nous. With it, I am able to see changes in the external world and explore many possibilities. However, as Nous made clear, knowledge comes at the price of suffering. The Omniscia is, in some ways, an eternal punishment.
While she does utilize the Matrix of Prescience Ultima to conduct her fortune telling, her main catalyst of foresight is her third eye, which is called the Omniscia. Her first character story explains how she attained the Omniscia from Nous. She had gotten permission to enter the library, where she met a blind old man. While not outright confirmed, it's heavily implied this man was Nous taking on a human form, so that's who I'm going to continue to refer to them as. Nous refused to answer Fu Xuan's question about whether or not all choices made in life are already fixed by fate. To quote the Eon directly, "I can only give you a problem, and the capacity to perceive the problem." This is an interesting way of writing a god of knowledge into your world. This supercomputer, designed to solve all of the universe's mysteries, does not wish to give out any answers. Instead, they want to provide people the means to solve the questions themselves. They don't give you the answer to a math question, they just hand you a calculator. And in Fu Xuan's case, they provided her their eye to calculate possible futures. They warned her beforehand that due to being a Xianzhou native, the Omniscia's power would cause her great pain for all eternity. But the girl asked for the eye regardless. Now, this story puts quotations around the words "the library," so naturally I figured there must be more to it. That led me to the description of the Key of Wisdom, the 4-star choice material for upgrading erudition characters. This is the proof of invitation to the halls of the News Temple. Finding the door of which this key opens is a far more arduous task than obtaining the key itself. Those who pass through the doors will immediately realize the impossibility of returning to this side. It's possible the Nuo's temple takes the form of a library, and Fu Xuan found the door to enter it and met the Eon. Now, the issue here is that last sentence of not returning to this side. Taken literally, it means once you enter the temple, you're trapped in there forever. Rip bozo. But I'm assuming it's meant to be taken more metaphorically. Like, you don't come out of the temple the same person you were when you entered. This would match with how Fu Xuan came out of the library with the Omniscia. Her first character story also reveals that she's originally from the Yuchue, where generations of her family had served as stargazers. She would be appointed as the student of the Yuchue's master diviner, Jing Tian. Yes, Jing Tian. I'll touch on that near the end of the video. The two would have heated debates as if they were equal peers. One of the topics they would debate about was predestination versus free will. Fu Xuan wondered what the point of doing divinations was, as for all she could tell, it just robbed people of their ability to choose. Jing Tian would argue that the Divination Commission's efforts don't rob people of their free will. He told her that the divinations of the Matrix simply act as a form of guidance to help people make the best decision. Through that, the diviners would lead the Xianzhou Alliance to eradicating Yaoshi and the denizens of abundance. During this discussion, he also brought up as an example that the barrier matrix showed him that he would eventually die because of Fu Xuan, but still took her under his wing. Fu Xuan felt distraught when her teacher told her that. The way he described it, it was like she would become a traitor who would kill her mentor in cold blood. And so, in an attempt to defy fate, she ran away. She fled to the Laofu, where she would become a diviner of that ship's branch of the commission. Centuries later, the Third Abundance War happened. Due to the sheer size of the Abundance's forces, Fu Xuan predicted that a head-on assault from the Xianzhou would result in their defeat. She tried to advise the generals to take a defensive strategy, but they didn't listen. The Xianzhou launched a frontal assault and ended up on the verge of defeat. With no other options, Fu Xuan went to Jingliu to suggest a last resort they could use to assure victory. Her plan was to send an SOS to their Eon, Lan, through the last known location of the Lux Arrow. However, there was one thing about the plan she didn't realize. The method she proposed to send a signal required an item called the Cloud Peer Telescope. The only person who could use the telescope was the Yuchue's master diviner, Jing Tian. The girl did not open her eyes, yet she could already see the world around her condense into solid form from nebulous mist, see all possibilities fade, and leave behind the solitary, absolute, and faultless choice. Those are not dreams. They are my past. They made me who I am. And he was right all this time. There is only ever one path in destiny. Based on that last line of Fu Xuan's final character story, Jing Tian sacrificed his life to pull off his former protege's plan and call upon Lan. The Lux Arrow fell and slaughtered the enemy, allowing the Xianzhou to win, albeit at a heavy cost. Yeah, this war really fucked up multiple characters. Like, goddamn, it's crazy how important of an event this was. Jing Tian's life ended by Fu Xuan's hand, but not out of malice. Like he told her in that conversation where he brought up that future to her, diviners have a duty to follow the predictions to lead the Xianzhou to victory against the Abundance. He and Fu Xuan did just that, following the path set before them by their predictions, even if it meant death for one of them. In her voice line titled Chat, Matrix of Prescience, Fu Xuan has this to say.
It is through this matrix that the diviners view the past and know the future. The Laofu, drifting on the sea of stars, could not be without it for even a day. But sometimes I wonder if it limits our future possibilities and seals our path ahead.
The way she describes it here makes it seem like there's a Schrodinger's cat type of conundrum to her divinations. There are limitless doors of possibilities for the future, but once a diviner makes a prediction, only one door is left open. Maybe she sometimes wonders if her teacher didn't choose to peer into the future when considering making Fu Xuan his pupil. Would he have lived past the war? However, there's one detail that proves that the future is never definitive, no matter how much data you have to try predicting it. After all, in the same conversation, Jing Tian said he had also predetermined that Fu Xuan would succeed him as the Master Diviner of the Yuchue. Yet here she is, the Master Diviner of the Lao Fu instead. She's proof that, to some degree, fate can be defied. So whether she realizes it or not, she accomplished the goal she had by running away to the Lao Fu. Also, remember that pin I put earlier about how Jing Yuan sounds similar to Jing Tian? Well, I think that is very much intentional. It's possible Jing Yuan could potentially remind Fu Xuan of her former mentor. She has called both men scoundrels, and in a game like this, reusing a word like scoundrel feels very much intentional. With that, you can interpret Fu Xuan's desire to have Jing Yuan retire as being a desire for his own well-being. Once he's no longer general, he won't be on the battlefield as often, and wouldn't be risking his life. This could just be her way of wanting the general to live and not die in combat like her teacher did. Or maybe I'm looking too deep into this, who knows? The idea of fate is such an interesting concept to tackle in stories. That's one of the reasons I latched onto Honkai Star Rail the way I did. The primary theme of this game's narrative, being fighting against fate and blazing your own trail, just resonates with me. And Fu Xuan's character and lore is a great and fascinating exploration of this reoccurring theme. Hopefully we get to spend more time with her in the future.
So, this is work?
You know, it's not as easy as it looks.
Qingque is a librarian working for the Divination Commission. She got a job at the commission to follow the wishes of her parents and thought it'd be an easy, secure gig. Her habit of laziness and not applying herself has made her the lowest level diviner in every department she's worked for, and has resulted in her constantly being transferred around. Qingque has had this abate personality since freshman year of high school. Every time exams were graded and the results were announced, Qingque's name would always be accompanied by a score of 60% every time. Teachers and tutors thought nothing of this at first, but became suspicious as this exact same number kept popping up again and again in her grades.
The only way to get all the answers wrong is to know which answers are right. You're trying to quit, and I'm not gonna let you.
She actively disregarded the advice of her tutors and kept scraping by with the minimal amount of effort to graduate. And now as a diviner, she follows a mantra she came up with herself.
There are 3 basic principles for happiness at work. Do not be proactive, do not say no, and do not be responsible. You should give it a try.
She despises doing her work so much that she revived a historic game just to waste time. No, seriously, Qingque was the one who reinvented Celestial Jade and brought it back to be played in the modern day. What started off as a small hobby she and her colleagues would play to pass the time spread and became a beloved game across the entire Luofu ship. You really get the vibe that Qingque is a character who's constantly failing upwards. Celestial Jade is very clearly inspired by Mahjong, a Chinese tile-based game that was invented in the 1800s. It's no wonder all users would want to represent a widely played game that originates from their culture through a character using the game in combat. The original name for Mahjong, Machui, means sparrow in Chinese. This fun bit of trivia actually can connect to Qingque in her name. The Qing in Qingque means green, and Xue can mean sparrow. Sparrows can symbolize a lot of positive things, but there were 3 words that stuck out: simplicity, freedom, and community. QQ wants her life to be simple and easy, wanting the freedom to do whatever she wants and finding enjoyment in putting in as little effort as possible into things she's required to do. The symbolism of community can connect to how she accidentally made Celestial Jade a super popular game for people in the Luofu to play. She's also associated with fish. Her splash art features a huge scroll behind her that has on it a parody of Leonardo da Vinci's Vitruvian Man, where the man's head is replaced with a fish. There's a slang term from China, mo yu, that literally translates to catching fish, but has gone on to describe office workers who loaf around instead of getting work done. That slang term was likely what made them decide to depict imagery of fish in Qingque's splash art in her kit. On top of that, her scroll also has an illustration of a dragon crossing through a gate. This is in reference to the Longmen story in Chinese mythology. The Longmen, a name which translates to Dragon Gate, is located at the top of a waterfall from a legendary mountain. The myth tells the story of many carp trying to swim upstream against the strong current of the river. The brave few who are capable enough to leap over the waterfall and cross the gate are transformed into a powerful dragon. If you're at all familiar with Pokemon, you are tangentially aware of this legend. That legend can be used to describe Qingque and her capabilities in battle. Most of the time, she's a carp who slacks off and constantly splashes her hand of tiles during combat. Plus, her constant slacking off has her on the verge of being demoted to a door guardian, meaning she'll physically be stuck right outside the gate. But the moment she hits the jackpot and gets her enhanced basic attack, she has made it up the waterfall and morphed into a dragon powerful enough to eviscerate enemies. It goes to show that if Qingque were to apply herself at her job, she'd be good at it. She simply doesn't want to put in the effort. That's the main characteristic of Qingque. Passion. She's passionate about Celestial Jade, wishing in one of her voice lines that she could play it all by herself. Her knowledge voice line also indicates that she has some level of passion for books and reading. Her subpar performance as a diviner isn't the result of a lack of qualifications or skill. She doesn't have the drive to do her job and will disregard it to spend time on what she wants to do. Qingque didn't get a whole lot of screen time in the main story of the Xianzhou, which is probably why I wrote her off and didn't look deeper into her until working on this analysis. But to get a bit personal here, I can relate to Qingque. I've also struggled during my years of school, not because I couldn't grasp the material, but because I just didn't apply myself to learning and doing the work. I also spent a good portion of my life coasting and just doing what other people, such as my parents, suggested I should do. One line from her second character story was what made it all click for me. The line in question was about how Qingque doesn't look forward to visiting her parents on New Year's and talking about life and her plans for the future because she doesn't have any plans at all. I could definitely resonate with that. For many years of my life, I had no clue what I wanted to be in the future. But I have a solid idea now. I want to keep making videos and make a career out of it. I want to write books and find success as an author. And hopefully Qingque's story goes in a similar direction, where she finds a path in life she wants to passionately pursue, whether it's becoming a Celestial Jade champion or finding passion in her work as a librarian for the Divination Commission. She's got multiple centuries of her life left to figure it all out.
Don't come any closer!
Huohuo, a judge in training for the Ten Lords Commission. Being the first of the two new 5 stars of version 1.5, she was the star of the show in the Continuance mission, A Foxing Tale of the Haunted, and its associated event. Sealed within her tail is a heliobus named, well, Tail. According to Xueyi during the quest, Sojourner's Ghastly Reverie, Huohuo has worked with the Ten Lords Commission for 38 years now. However, she wasn't always a judicial trainee. When she was recruited into the Ten Lords Commission, she started out as a Spiritfarer. From what we know about the Ten Lords, they often deal with those who develop Mara sickness. The Spiritfarers are in charge of maintaining the Commission's exorcism tools. Based on Hanya's second character story, Spiritfarers also take care of Ingenia, the sentient mechanical beings that you usually fight as enemies. Back when Huohuo was a Spiritfarer, Xueyi would often come to her for repairs. Huo means Lophanthus rugosus. It's an aromatic herb native to East Asia. It's used in traditional Chinese medicine to relieve nausea, vomiting, and poor appetite. The medicinal origin of her name fits her as a healer in battle and how she did repairs for Xueyi. It having a strong fragrance may tie into her being a magnet that draws inhuman beings like astral spirits to her. The repeated character in her name can also mean being, which I like to interpret as why Huohuo is so small. Xueyi's voice line about Huohuo also reveals something interesting about the Green Foxian.
Only 38 years have passed since Huohuo joined the commission as a Spiritfarer, but she's already become a judge. The speed of her promotion is unheard of. As per the commission's rules, it would have taken anyone else at least 500 years.
It's revealed in Huohuo's 4th character story that part of her quick promotion is thanks to Tail. Whenever they encountered Heliobi, Tail would temporarily possess Huohuo to get physical with them and take them out. Huohuo got the credit for this and thus got a promotion rather early, with her main task as a trainee judge now being to eradicate any evil spirits she encounters. Huohuo and Tail have a bond like Eddie and Venom. They are yin and yang in terms of personality. Huohuo is extremely timid and scared of everything, fearing the very monsters she's tasked with capturing or destroying. Her lack of courage is also why she even still has the job. She's too scared to bring herself to quit. Her main weapon is a white flag, which she carries around so she can wave around when she almost immediately surrenders. Her signature light cone paints the perfect picture of her most primary trait, being so scared of picking up a normal object that was delivered to her. I wouldn't be surprised if this girl was afraid of her own shadow, though if I had a tail possessed by a demon, I would be too. Speaking of which, Tail is the polar opposite of Huohuo. He's loud, boastful, and extremely short-tempered. He'll have a burning desire to beat someone up for just looking at him the wrong way. Part of why he's like this is because he's the representation of the arrogance of Ignomar, a super powerful heliobus who was split apart by Xiao, the former general of the Lao Fu. He finds Huohuo's cowardice frustrating, making sarcastic remarks and outright mocking her for it at times. But their relationship has developed into something deeper than mutual frustration. Huohuo always blames Tail for her ominous title as the Cursed One, and Tail finds having a host like Huohuo can be frustrating at times. However, years have passed, and Tail hasn't harmed Huohuo in the slightest. Although Tail never fails to help her after witnessing enough frustration, he denies any notion of friendship. Say hello to Tail, the biggest tsundere in all of Star Rail. Now is a better time than any to delve into how the two ended up sharing a body. While most heliobi that were fragments of Ignomar were sealed inside the creation furnace, Tail managed to get away. He floated around aimlessly for a long while, arrogantly refusing to not possess anyone. However, that would soon turn out to be nearly fatal for him. He would have become utterly exhausted, becoming so weak that he laid on the ground as a small ball of fire. He would have extinguished to embers that very night if it weren't for a little fox girl. She felt sorry for the little flame and wanted to help it, so she picked it up and put it on her tail. And then, Tail tried to consume her, the main means of sustenance for heliobi like him. Hanya arrived at the scene, but couldn't fully repel the heliobus out of the girl's body without harming Willow Ho-Ho in the process. Hanya could only seal the beast onto the girl's tail. Because of that, Huohuo was taken into the custody of the 10 Lords and became a member of the Commission. Getting possessed by Tail would also result in Huohuo becoming a total pariah. Her classmates didn't understand her situation and ostracized her for her tail being on fire. During the quest Foxing Dream, we see an illusion of her mother repeating things she said to Huohuo in real life, and
I don't know who you are, but you're not my Huohuo. Keep that filthy thing you're carrying away from me.
Is my sister okay?
The farther you stay away from her, the better. I'm sorry, Huohuo. Your father and I had no choice but to send you to the 10 Lords Commission. Oh, it's best if you pretend we never existed.
Mother of the fucking year, oh my god, poor girl.
How can your own flesh and blood be so heartless? These humans.
You see, even Tail gets it. This chick sucks. Also, the March 7th event where Tail goes into Scott's mind and him going into Luca's mind during the war dance, it's just really funny how Tail, of all characters, is the free therapist of this game. Now, another aspect I feel is notable for this analysis of Huohuo comes from another NPC outside of this questline, an NPC named Meowdian, who can be found in Feixiao Garden, has this to say about the Commission. As you know, the 10 Lords Commission is a rather unique place. It has the vital duty of administrating Xianzhou people's lives and deaths. Hence, the 10 Lords Commission must remain independent and clean. Any benefits established between the Commission and functional society can pose a potential risk that will destabilize the alliance. Anyway, because of this, the members of the 10 Lord Commission are made up of people who live in seclusion. Orphans, weirdos, prisoners, just to name a few. Not only did Huohuo lose all the close connections she had in the past, she also struggled to forge any new connections with people due to the specifics of her job. All this meant the closest bond she has by the time we meet her in the game is Tail. That's why, despite calling all of her misfortunes retribution for helping him earlier in that same quest, she's sad to see him sacrifice himself to stop Cirrus by the end of Sojourner's ghastly reverie. However, he comes back to Huohuo by the end of Foxing Dream, finding her going down the worst possible version of Memory Lane. She's initially in disbelief that Tail survived, but then assumes he's another phantasm of someone who left her, just like her mom and classmates.
They've all gone. All abandoned me.
The following instance of gameplay shows Tail doing something genuinely sweet. He takes the illusions of people who shunned Huohuo in the past and drag them back to her, giving her apologies. While Huohuo knows these apologies ring hollow since they're not the real people who pushed her away, it does make her realize that the Tail she's seen is the real one. Tail tells her that after the situation with Cirrus, he thought about running away again, but some part of him was compelled to make sure Huohuo was alright. And I think I'll let this part of their interaction speak for itself.
No! You're selling yourself short. You're daring. How you had the courage to do something so dangerous amazes me. It's not bravery you lack, but sense.
What other choice did I have? I suspected that Cirrus was deceiving me, but the thought of losing you forever was unbearable.
Forget about all that. I'm here now. But did everyone really leave you because of me?
But you came back for me. And that's all I need.
Oh, I love the found family trope!
Huohuo's character and her dynamic with Tail is super funny and charming, which made her entertaining to follow through the early parts of this continuance questline. However, her story develops into something a lot more heartfelt with a nice message. Let the story of Huohuo and Tail serve as a reminder to you, the audience, that no matter who you are or how much you feel like an outcast, there's someone out there who will appreciate you for all that you are.
By the will of the 10 lords, execute the Marastruck!
This had to be a 2-for-1 where I analyzed both. You can't really talk about one without the other. The only times they were apart was their on-screen debuts and when they were added to the game as playable units. Xueyi made her debut all the way back in 1.0, where Dan Heng and his 2 new friends save her from some Mars-struck enemies. We learned she's one of the 4 judges of the Xianzhou's 10 Lords Commission, specifically the Judge of Detention. We also learn she's a cyborg. She got her motor broken while fighting the Mars truck and couldn't move, but thankfully, Luocha was able to use his abilities to fix her right up on the spot. As for Hanya, she debuted in the 1.5 continuance quest on the Luofu, a foxy tale of the haunted, in the company of her sister and Huohuo. Hanya is another judge of the 10 Lords, the judge of interrogation to be exact. She can interrogate me anytime, I mean what? When you talk to Hanya in the fixed troll garden, you can learn from her dialogue that she and Xueyi have been in the 10 Lords Commission for at most 12 centuries. They've been in the same line of work for so long, it's no wonder it feels like the two are an inseparable package deal. Even the names they go by connect through a running theme. The name Hanya translates to Frigid Raven, which is also her username in the Ghostly Grove event. Xueyi's literal meaning is Snow White Clothing, with her username during the event being Snowing Overcoat. Through these names, you get the picture of a pair of cold existences, indicating how they're both husks of their former selves in different ways.
As a member of the 10 Lords Commission, you may as well consider me a member of the dead.
Hanya and Xueyi are nicknames for the white and black pieces in a Xianzhou chess game. Xueyi is the nickname for the white pieces, Hanya is the black pieces. We don't know their original names, and Hanya makes it clear that she and her sister discarded their names upon becoming judges. To quote Hanya directly, once you entered the 10 Lords Commission, it's like entering a life after death. Your name and life before are meaningless. This makes sense, as the 10 Lords Commission is a reference to Chinese mythology. Diyu is the realm of the dead in Chinese myth, and the 10 Lords of Yanlao exist to judge the severity of a person's sins. The amount of time a soul spends in Diyu before being reincarnated, and the punishment they're given, is dependent on the weight of their sins. Another name for the 10 courts is the 10 Lords, with the same hyphen in the middle that's present with the Xianzhou's commission. But we do know some things about the sisters' lives prior to working for the 10 Lords. The key moment in their past is illustrated in the Under the Blue Sky light cone. In a field of wheat, Xueyi wove together a flower wreath that she placed on Hanya's head. That was when they were still the same height. That was when they shared the same smile. The story of this light cone is referenced at least once in both of their character stories, plus Hanya sketches it in the art for Multiverse Vistas 2024. This is one of the few moments of pure happiness the sisters had throughout their very long lives. Xueyi's third character story actually gives us a bit more insight into their past. They were once starship pilots, facing whatever the world threw at them side by side. Xueyi would always be sure to gently wipe any dirt or stains that got on Hanya's face. Xueyi was the older sister, but she also served as a mother figure for Hanya. Just like herself, her sister has grown and matured. She shouldn't always wipe her sister's face clean in front of everyone like an anxious mother. But how could she ever just let go of things? She vowed to protect this space forever, vowing to do many, many things. We don't know what exactly their home life was like, but the fact Xueyi feels such a natural urge to take care of her sister like a mom does lead me personally to believe their parents were absent in their lives. But if there's anything we've learned so far about the Xianzhou characters, it's that once the characters get old enough, they get emotional damage. Tragedy would eventually strike the sisters, and it was all Xuhu's fault. It was during the zombie planet Huohuo's attack on the Xianzhou Sengcheng. Air forces from the Yanqing showed up to fight the Army of Abundance, only to get wiped out. Later during the battle, the land had become scorched in flames, and Xueyi would die in the process, as her character details reveal her mortal body was reduced to ash. As a spirit, Xuhu reached out to her, promising that he could save everyone by bestowing them the Abundance's blessing of immortality. Sobbing, she closed her eyes, incapable of providing any resistance. At this moment, she was just an insignificant fruit upon this giant tree, powerless against mighty roots. In case you're wondering, they're very literal about the fruit thing. Hanya picked up a broken sword to try resisting, only to be frightened when her sister's face blossomed out of the walking, talking tree, along with the faces of her other dead comrades. I'm only bringing this up because what in the fucking nightmare fuel? I think it's safe to say, after this and the Jingliu analysis, Xuyu is an asshole. I know, hot take of the century over here, but like...
He's an asshole.
Hanya and her comrades would also fall victim to Xuhu's influence and become Mara-struck, sprouting flowers out of their bodies. Their saving grace was the Laofu's general at the time, Teng Xiao, who used the power of Lightning Lord to stop Xuhu for the time being. While Hanya and Xuyi's souls were saved from the forces of abundance, they did not leave that battle scot-free. Now, how exactly they joined the Ten Lords isn't explained from what I could find, so the following explanation is just what I could discern from context clues. The sisters were still tainted with Mara, so the Ten Lords deemed them unsafe to let them continue their average lives. They offered the sisters positions in the commission to work outside the public eye. Otherwise, their souls would be locked away in the Hall of Karma. Now, you may have noticed just how shitty of a hand these two were dealt here. These girls were being punished for being stricken with Mara, even though it happened because they were up against an emanator of abundance, someone who can make you Mara-struck just by looking at you a certain way. But, oh boy, we're only at the tip of this iceberg. Just you wait, their story gets even worse from here. They built Xueyi a cybernetic body for her soul to reside in going forward. As the judge of detention, she would go out and take down criminals. They continuously reiterate how she lives in a puppet body, following the orders of the Ten Lords without question. However, Xueyi made a compromise with the commission. For every villain she captured, she'd get to spend half a day in the living world with Hanya. The two were worked to the bone, being treated as nothing but pawns for the Ten Lords, tying back to that chess metaphor with their code names. By the way, I neglected to mention this in my initial recording, so I'm sorry for the abrupt transition into this next piece of info. I decided to look into the inspiration for the small mask that Xueyi wears on her outfit, as its imagery is used in her ultimate as well. I remembered Xiao from Genshin had a similar mask, so I figured it must be connected to Chinese culture. Xueyi's mask is in part inspired by Nuo opera, a type of traditional theater in China where the actors wear stylized masks. However, the exact mask they used as inspiration for both Xueyi and Xiao is from a similar performing art in Japan called No. This mask is commonly used to represent women who have turned into demons due to their overwhelming sorrow and rage. You can see that as a metaphor for Xueyi having been turned into a cyborg who feels great sorrow and rage due to her current predicament. To top it off, the name of the mask is Hanya. There's no way that wasn't intentional. Hanya's specific job involves her living through a sinner's memories to accurately judge their sins, writing down their verdict and punishment with the oracle brush she uses as her weapon as a playable unit. So aside from the flower wreath one with her sister, all the other memories mentioned in Hanya's first character story are not memories that belong to her. Due to the high amount of negative emotions she's exposed to through exploring the memories of sinners, Hanya is constantly on the verge of becoming Mara-struck. She has to drink the wine of oblivion to wipe the sinner's memories out of her mind. However, this wine has the side effect of making her forgetful of her own memories, meaning that if she keeps taking it, she's bound to forget even her sister. Well, that sucks, to say the very least. Is Shuji's situation any better? No. Not at all. For one thing, her new body means she's incapable of many of the things she could do or feel when she was human. She can't sigh, she can't feel pain, she has next to no emotions, and as noted by the Lycone Return to Darkness, her body doesn't exude any warmth whatsoever. A violent surge of fury irrevocably overwhelmed her so much that she didn't even find the time to clear her mind, or to remember this crucial and neglected fact. Big Sis's body has been cold like this for a very long time. But believe it or not, viewers, we're still not done. Somehow it gets even worse than her losing so many human functions. The criminals that Xueyi goes after are typically very dangerous, so her battles with them, more often than not, result in her cyborg body taking a lot of damage. And sometimes that damage isn't repairable, meaning she has to transfer her soul into a new puppet body. But that isn't a smooth, simple process. Sister, having an ingenium body will always lull you into a false sense of invulnerability. However, I have to use the remaining days of reanimation to offset premature damage to this body of yours. I hope you can remember during your next mission that you've still got a sister out there who cares about you. I remember. Otherwise, you'll have to get Huohuo to write this line into your mind. Just joking, Huohuo. No need for that. I trust my sister can remember it. While this may seem like a harmless joke at first, there was this line at the end of Xueyi's third character story that made me look at this from a different angle. Like everyone who jolts awake from a dream, she returns to her body, but has forgotten the momentary dream. The judge, dressed in white, feels befuddled. When Xueyi's consciousness is transferred into a new robot body, it's not fully guaranteed that her memory will stay completely intact. The transferring of her soul may cause some small bits of amnesia. Both of these sisters are having their memories regress more and more as they continue their work for the Ten Lords Commission, and the worst part is that it is acknowledged that eventually the two sisters will forget each other. What happens after that is told in Hanya's second character story during a conversation between the two. If I end up forgetting everything about you, then both of us can finally embrace our demise without any burdens. By the benevolence of the Ten Lords, this promise has been recorded in the depths of the Hall of Karma. And at that moment, we shall relinquish all and enter eternal slumber. I won't lie, before making this video series, I did not read much on the lore. Making these videos really enlightened me to how much depth there is to this game's universe. I already figured Hanya and Xueyi's past was tragic from what could be gleaned from their appearances in quests and their light cones, but damn, I never would have thought their story would be this depressing. These two have one of the saddest backstories of any playable character in this game. They were purely victims of circumstance, going into battle against an opponent that severely outclassed them. They were unfairly punished and turned into pawns for the Ten Lords Commission, slowly losing themselves and their memories of each other. The only memories that persist of their lives prior were a scant few moments of their childhood, tainted by the battle that ruined everything for them. The only saving grace is that they've lived their whole lives together up until now, and at least they'll be able to die and rest peacefully together too. I don't really have a good way to end this. Hanya and Xueyi show us that sometimes life is utterly awful and unfair, giving good people the worst possible fates. The only hope is that they find a way out of the Ten Lords Commission and are allowed to live their lives on their own terms again, but who knows if that will ever happen. I think the perfect statement about what Hanya and Xueyi's story represents is Jiaoqiu's voice line about them.
Those two sisters epitomize the failures of the Xianzhou alliance. No one can live well, and no one can die well. If even death is a luxury, then what kind of monsters have we become?
Where the wind whispers, You cannot hide!
The crow-feathered weirdo that works as a shadow guard for the Yanqing and its general, Feixiao. He's not much for conversation, rarely speaking, and quite literally blends into the background at times.
I've mastered the ability of standing so incredibly still that I've become invisible to the eye.
Because he isn't very vocal with what he's thinking and didn't get many opportunities to shine during the second Xianzhou visit, we don't learn a lot about him from the story, though we still get good moments of characterization that I'll touch on later. Thankfully, his character stories help to fill in the blanks. Moze is a victim of the disciples of Sanctus Medicus. They performed grueling experiments on him in the name of their Eon Yaoshi to transform him from a short-life species to a long-life one. They claimed it was a kind act on their part to heal his unspecified illness, but it was painful nonetheless. They forced him to swallow strange substances that made him feel like his body was being devoured and torn from the inside out. The disciples watched him suffer, telling him repeatedly to simply endure it. While writhing in pain, we get a small glimpse into what his life was like before he was kidnapped by the disciples. He will no longer be the orphan abandoned by his village in the wilderness. Then, every word he speaks will be answered, and he will no longer be alone. He was a child who was exiled from the place he once called home, forced to survive in the wild in absolute solitude. I want to bring up the meaning behind his name, as I think it could tie into this part of his backstory. The Mo in Moze can mean leopard, which tend to be symbols for stealth, bravery, cunning, shape-shifting, as well as survival and self-reliance. Those last two tie into how he presents himself to others, like how he told the Astral Express crew that he didn't want to rescue Jiaoqiu, prioritizing his own safety above all else. We'll touch on that a bit later. The Z part of his name means marsh or swamp, which can tie into his dark aesthetic and the fact that crows are found to live near marshes. The name Moze derives from Chinese legend. It's documented in the miscellaneous morsels from Yanqing, a collection of short anecdotes and stories of both fantastical and mundane phenomena, that the Moze is a beast as big as a dog, and its fat is very hard to hold as it can slip through hands, clay, and even metal, but it can't slip through bone-made vessels. The slipperiness of the beast's fat coincides with how easily Moze can sneak around wherever he goes and stay totally undetected, as well as how often he's broken out of jail, according to Jiaoqiu in Inquisition to Rectitude. Plus, the comparison of the beast being the size of a dog could relate to his affiliation with Foxians like Feixiao and Jiaoqiu. I provide this context of etymology because I believe the origins of his name can connect to his backstory. It's possible the vague illness Moze was suffering from had something to do with his bones or flesh, which would explain the excruciating pain being internal. The final line of his first character story is the following quote: "No one cares what he has to say, so he slowly grows accustomed to not talking." His preference to speak as little as possible is a product of how he was nothing more than a guinea pig of the Sanctus Medicus, and the saddest part is that he was groomed to believe this wasn't as abhorrent as it was.
I was raised by the disciples of Sanctus Medicus. Never-ending treatments, unreasonable family rules, and temperamental family members. I used to think all these things were a part of normal life.
He was such a young and impressionable orphan with no solid concept of family that he genuinely believed what these people did to him was done out of genuine love and kindness. That is heartbreaking to see. That's why when Feixiao killed the disciples he deemed as family, he attacked her to try getting revenge. Feixiao pretty easily handled Moze and disarmed him. She was reminded of how she was in the Borson war camp, so she took him in. She promised that one day he'd be able to enact his vengeance on her. "Of course, until the day you kill me, you must do as I tell you. You will eat 3 square meals every day, study, learn martial arts. Oh, and you will shower daily." The symbol of their promise was the single strail she gave to him that day. The same strail Moze is clutching in his E6 art. Can you tell the producer of this game is a Trails fan? Also, brief tangent, but I find that last bit of Feixiao's dialogue really funny. I imagine Moze took the shower daily bit to heart, and that's why 2 of his hobbies are bathing and cleaning. It's a dumb headcanon, but I find it funny and I wanted to bring it up. Feixiao selected Moze to be the shadow guard of the Yanqing. His dagger was not only pointed at the general, but also the enemies of the ship. You would think that since he still sees the Sanctus Medicus as his family, he was only tagging along with Feixiao and Jiaoqiu to follow orders and nothing more. And he certainly seems to come off that way in the first half of the Continuance questline, particularly when you run into him after Huohuo broke out of his cell. Like I mentioned before with the meaning of his name, this scene in Rogues on the Run has Moze shows zero sympathy for Jiaoqiu's situation. He says trying to save Jiaoqiu is a lost cause, and that there was no way they stood a chance against Huohuo. He also said his initial plan was to get out of the shackling prison on his own and report back, indicating at face value that he's only concerned with his well-being and no one else's. Then cut to the very next patch where he's actively trying to save Jiaoqiu from Huohuo and apologizes to Feixiao for failing to do so. 2.4 Moze, I don't care about Jiaoqiu, I only care about myself. 2.5 Moze, I'll protect this man with my life actually. It's clear Moze does care about his general and fellow retainer, despite what he claimed to feel back in the shackling prison. I don't think this is an inconsistency with the writing. The key difference between 2.4 and 0.5 is who he's interacting with. The shackling prison scene has him talk to the Trailblazer, Don Hung, and Hanya, people he's unfamiliar with, so it can be interpreted that he's putting up an indifferent front around them specifically. When around Feixiao and Jiaoqiu, that's when he drops the facade and shows he does care for them. If that's not enough, listen to Feixiao's voice line about him.
I granted him permission to assassinate me anytime he wished. Lately, his attempts have become less frequent, but his accuracy has improved significantly.
Now listen to Moze's voice line about her.
Feixiao allows me to try to assassinate her at any time. She uses me as a dagger with which to sharpen her senses. This is how she shows her trust in me. But to this day, I have not won a single time.
You see the quotations around the word assassinate, as if it's not actually an assassination at this point, it's just Moze testing Feixiao's reflexes without any true murderous intent. It's apparent he's changed a lot from the tortured kid who sought revenge, even if he refuses to acknowledge it. If he did, what meaning would his vengeance and their vow have? I like to interpret that line from his final character story as him believing that if he were to stop with the assassination attempts completely, then Feixiao wouldn't need him anymore as her shadow guard. He keeps doing it because he wants to be kept around. Him developing a fondness for his comrades lines up with his association with crows. Crows are often symbols for bad omens, but there are some positive spiritual meanings to crows as well. Crows can symbolize someone going through spiritual or emotional change, which is exactly what Moze has done. The last line of his fourth character story perfectly illustrates the change in his outlook. He's become accustomed to not speaking, but also to having people speak on his behalf. Over the years, he's realized the type of people his former family truly was, but has found a new family of good people who treat him with genuine tenderness. Even when he tries his hardest to repress thoughts of his past and how awful his upbringing really was, some part of him is aware that his life is better now than it ever was before. A touching story like that makes me happy that Moze is here to complete this lovely trio.
Though life is as a speck of dust, it dances still in grace.
Hey guys, Shiro here. Yup, totally, Shiro. Tingyun is a character who was once wasted potential due to a twist that, in retrospect, wasn't really done well. The Tingyun we met during the Laofu Trailblaze mission was merely a disguise for Lord Ravager Fentilia, a Heliobuzz who, possibly because of their emanator status, was strong enough to take a form based off Tingyun, which was perfect enough for her to sneak onto the ship undetected. However, as it was revealed in patch 2.5, the real Tingyun appears to be alive and well. In spite of us not truly meeting Tingyun during our first trip to the Laofu, the character stories of her 4-star variant do give us insights into who she really was. It makes sense they do this, as they obviously didn't want to give away it was Fentilia in disguise 2 patches before the big reveal. So, from all of this, what did we learn about the real Tingyun through her imposter?
Speaking of imposters, The evil has been defeated. Anyway, go subscribe to Manny. He's a cool guy and fellow lore head for HSR. I'm super glad we got to do a dumb bit like this. Tingyun is the caster of the Whistling Flames Guild, a merchant group affiliated under the Skyfaring Commission. In the readable, the Luofu Skyfaring Commission Guilds list, it's explained that Tingyun's guild possesses the fastest and safest biotransport vessels in the galaxy, importing and exporting products for refinement. Tingyun is arguably the best merchant on the Luofu. Her character details mention how it's thanks to her the Xianzhou trade fairs are known as well as they are throughout the cosmos. If that's not enough, her second character story ends with the following quote. As a result, a dazzling new star of trade dawned aboard the Xianzhou Luofu. With her warm personality and talented skills, this foxing girl successfully completed trade missions to 16 different planets and re-signed another bilateral agreement with the IPC. The famous Xianzhou Trade Bonanza, the Grand Fair, also developed into a famous fiesta under her advocacy. The Whistling Flames is just one of Tingyun's multiple avenues of doing business. One of the first times we ever see Tingyun was in the final closed beta trailer, where she was selling pictures of Jingliu, and knowing his fans, those pictures would sell like hotcakes. She's often described as silver-tongued, speaking and presenting herself amicably around her benefactors to ensure her success in persuading them to make a deal or a purchase. Heck, her voice line about business outright states her personal philosophy for her line of work.
Peace is the best for business. It's best to work with persuadable people. For those who are less persuadable, cooling them down with a fan works wonders.
This actually ties into another integral aspect of Tingyun, and that is her emphasis on keeping things civil. Her second character story mostly focuses on how she differs from most Foxians, and that she is much more pacifistic. She's never been good at combat and prefers to keep her fur fluffy and soft. When other Foxians playfully pull on her fur, she tries to politely ask them to stop instead of joining in and getting back at them. Her third character story goes into further detail about this. You know that fan she uses in-game as her weapon? Well, there's a reason I put air quotes around the word weapon in that sentence, because that fan is a symbol of her pacifism. She doesn't like to carry around any kind of weapon while doing business, seeing it as dishonoring any potential friendships and simply being bad business. That's why she chose to carry around an Ingenium 6-ribbed reticulated fan made by the Artisanship Commission. With how pacifistic she is, it's no wonder she's a Harmony unit in-game as a 4-star. It's also noteworthy how her playstyle has shifted in her 5-star Nihility form. While she still has the fan and fulfills a similar support role, her ultimate going from support-based to offensive indicates how she doesn't follow her pacifistic beliefs as strongly as before. That near-death experience broke her as much as Fantilia broke her neck. Look, if Hoyoverse can beat this dead horse, so can I, alright? But her civil temperament is what results in her internal struggle. She's set to become the next Helm Master of the Skyfaring Commission after Yukong. However, due to not being much of any good at combat, she's doubtful she'll live up to the role. Her lack of battle skills frustrated her parents, who served as pilots for the commission. However, Tingyun's nonviolent nature is exactly why Yukong chose her to be her successor. Times are changing. Xianzhou is changing. One day, this giant ship will grow utterly exhausted of a sky full of blood and war. When that time comes, the Skyfaring Commission will be your stage. Tingyun wasn't sure if Yukong's words to her were completely serious or not, rather telling of her self-doubt. Still, she wrote down Yukong's words in a letter that she keeps locked in the back of her drawer in her store. Tingyun vowed to show her own type of strength, that being her mastery as a saleswoman. Tingyun's bond with Yukong actually ties into my next topic, the meaning behind her name. Tingyun means lingering clouds. She shares a name with a Chinese poem written by Tao Yuanming. Allow me to read a short part of the poem for you. Wouldn't it be the same with my friends? I am missing you the most. My wishes have not come to be. This regret and remorse out of my control. At first, I wondered how this poem could connect to Tingyun, but then I had an epiphany. Tingyun is the one being missed. In the context of Star Rail, the poem makes way more sense if you see it as being written from Yukong's point of view, thinking of Tingyun. And man, putting it that way just makes me sad, I won't lie. While on the topic of names, Phantilia's name in the Chinese text is Huan Long, with Huan being spelled with the character for illusion and Long meaning hazy. A name meaning hazy illusion is certainly a fitting one for someone who disguised herself in order to get on the Xianzhou and sow discord from within. As for the name Phantilia, it's likely a play on the word phantom. She's a heliobus after all, which are commonly mistaken for ghosts in HSR's universe. Okay, I think that about covers all we knew about tingyun prior to her return. So, let's get into Fugue, shall we? When Himiko and Welt went to drop off fossils for Ron Mei, they happened to discover Tingyun survived her encounter with Phantilia. The express crew agreed to help Fugue get back home, but she first asks to go to Penacony to reframe her mindset before returning, as Himiko put it in her conversation with Screwlum. It's interesting how they build up to Fugue's new appearance. The express crew happened to come across Tingyun's psyche being split apart into this Fox Girl extravaganza.
Hot chick heaven.
Not only was this set up for the reveal of one week's whole existence, but also how fractured our merchant's state of mind is, since there are so many versions of her that represent a ton of different sides of her personality. Once Fugue is reconstructed, we get answers as to how she's alive. The reason she wasn't instantly killed by a Lord Ravager was because Phantilia needed time to claim everything she could from Tingyun to construct her disguise. That time was all Tingyun needed to be found by a certain traveling merchant who brought her to Miss Ron Mei so she could be saved. She's in a similar predicament as our Trailblazer, who's harboring a Stellaron within. However, the Trailblazer's body has been outright mentioned to be capable of harboring a Stellaron with no issue. Tingyun's body isn't built with that same resistance to the forces of destruction, and thus, she's left with the yellow scars we see on her body. But her body wasn't the only part of her damaged by Phantilia. Ron Mei explains in Fugue's third character story that Phantilia's destruction of you has never ceased. Although you have temporarily overcome the power of destruction in your body, her torment of your will has only just begun. We see this torment of her will in the quest A Misfortune of Survivors. She's stuck in a limbo state where the destruction takes form as Antimatter Legion enemies. Ron Mei warns Fugue that fighting back against the destruction within her is futile, as it'd be a never-ending battle that would corrode her mind until she was left as a husk of who she once was. If she wants to live, she has to choose to coexist with the roots of destruction that have scarred her body, living a paradoxical existence.
Survival or destruction is no longer a choice for you. They both now grow along the same path.
Fugue's story of rebirth and learning to live with her scars can be read as a metaphor to real-life trauma survivors, whether that trauma be physical, mental, or anything in between. There's no easy way to cure someone's trauma. You can certainly recover from that trauma, but it will never completely go away. Those scars, whether they're physical or metaphysical, will stick with you for the rest of your life. But rejecting or repressing that pain will only cause you more torment in the long run. To go forward, you have to accept that it'll forever be a part of you, but it doesn't need to define you. You're no less of a person for it. Something that can help a trauma survivor cope with their situation is to speak with fellow survivors. That's why her reunion with Yukong is so important, not only because of their mother-daughter-like bond, but because Yukong's experiences with death has given her a similar view of the value of life that Tingyun now holds. Both Foxians think highly of the lives of mortals, and thus wish to liberate themselves from their status as pawns for the eons. It's the conversation with Yukong that convinces Fugue that she has to play an important role in this upcoming battle with the gods. When the Tingyuns come back together as Fugue, we briefly see a fiery peony. Peonies can represent a whole ton of things, so it was hard to narrow down which one to go with, but I think the most apt piece of peony symbolism is it representing wealth, fitting of her occupation as a merchant. Fugue is also visually associated with lotuses. Not only does the flower show up in her splash art, but her multiple tails are meant to be in a similar shape to a lotus. Lotuses are symbols for purity, which ties into her wanting our memories with the Tingyun we met on Xianzhou to not be tainted by Phantilia. On top of that, lotuses often represent rebirth and enlightenment. traits that Fugue very much demonstrates upon her reintroduction to the game. This plays into her new name. Dissociative fugue is a rare psychiatric phenomena where a person develops amnesia or loss of identity due to aimless or unexpected wandering from their usual environment. This type of amnesia is reversible, as people who have suffered from it were able to recall lost memories upon returning to their home environment or reuniting with people from their past. Something we see when Tingyun reunites with Yukong and the two reminisce together. During their time with dissociative fugue, the person can develop a whole new sense of identity, which is emblematic of Fugue's choice to not return home in order to involve herself with the Godslayer protocol. Fugue's splash art also features her reaching out to her reflection in the water. That reflection takes the appearance of her 4-star form. People were quick to point out the similarity between this and Ranmei's signature light cone. Obviously, we've gone over how the two are connected in terms of the story, but is there anything deeper than that? I think the most logical answer is how the light cone describes Ranmei's visage in the mirror seems untouched by time. But we can clearly see Tingyun has changed from her reflection. Fugue has undergone not just a physical transformation, but a shift in identity as well. Meanwhile, Ranmei has never gone through the same drastic change, remaining steadfast in who she is and her research of the fundamentals of life. Fugue's story is about learning to live with the darkest parts of your lifetime. She shows that it's possible to navigate through life even after horrific experiences. I'm glad Tingyun got to return and be used to communicate such a message, and I'm excited to see what part she'll play in the larger narrative of HSR.
Eternal sleep is not the end. The dead will return!
I won't lie, I've been dreading the idea of covering Luocha. Not because I dislike him, quite the contrary. I love Luocha, he's my best healer and a character I've enjoyed and been fascinated by. But I intentionally saved him for last in my series of Xianzhou videos because of how much ground I had to cover for the sake of being thorough. But I shall try my best. So, Luocha. Where do I even start? No? We'll save him for later. When you first meet Luocha, he seems like a charming enough fellow. Courteous, professional, while still having a pretty good sense of humor. He's a merchant with medical expertise. At the end of his companion mission, A Night Stranger, he displays a willingness to go out of his way to help people and give them medicine if necessary, seen with how he helps back and forth out of a ditch. But it's rather evident since his introduction there is a more sinister side to Luocha that he keeps under wraps. His companion quest actually ends with a bit of security footage where he says something rather ominous.
Worry not. I'll handle it. Yes, none of this is our concern. The journey has only just begun to...
The 4-star light cone featuring Luocha, titled Perfect Timing, shows how Jingliu keeps a close eye on the foreign traveler's behavior. Characters' voice lines about him talk about finding him strange or being unfamiliar with the coffin he carries around. Except for Sushang, but as I mentioned in her video, that's just her being a bright-eyed youth not knowing any better. Of course, the biggest mystery of Luocha since 1.0 was the ornate coffin always by his side, and what was inside it. A mystery we wouldn't get an answer to until 2.5, over a year later. Heck, even the name he goes by isn't his true name. It's an alias he uses on the Xianzhou. Luocha is the name for a type of evil spirit in Buddhist mythology who were once evil humans in their past lives. They use their venomous fingernails to kill and eat human flesh, and are known for harassing priests and desecrating graves. The character for Lo means net or gauze, while the Cha character can mean temple or monastery. That last part of the name, as well as the mythological context, connects to the small glimpse we get of Luocha's past and his second character story. He would sometimes think of home. The devils, the church, the insanity, none of those are good memories. People would clamber to high places in groups just so they could witness their city's demise. If everything were to end, then there shall be at least one witness. In that same story, people bring up how his outfit stands out because the style originates from his home planet, not the Xianzhou. When asked why he wears those clothes, he answers that it reminds him of the path he must keep treading. The mention of devils in that excerpt means that by taking on the name Luocha, he sees himself no differently from the other scoundrels from his homeworld. He views himself as an evil spirit, the one witness who watched his entire city burn. Maybe Hanya was onto something when she assumed Luocha carries a coffin to remind himself that he's constantly followed by death. But instead of his coffin, it's his clothes to remind him that he walks the path of a sinner and death always lurks close by. Even if he has the noblest intentions for his actions, he recognizes what he's doing is dubious at best. Another reading for the name Luocha, which is the most common reading of the evil spirit's name, is Rakshasa, which will be important for later. Hold your horses, jeez. As mentioned previously, one of the greatest mysteries of HSR at launch was what exactly was inside the coffin. All we knew for the first couple of patches was that whoever was inside was neither friend nor relative to Luocha, and that he brought the coffin onto the Luofu to fulfill a promise he made to someone. But even back then, one look at his ultimate animation, and we all knew there was something shady going on. He's constantly talking to it, and his signature light cone, Echoes of the Coffin, has a thorny branch come out and pierce his palm when he knocks on it. Whoever or whatever is in there, it's very much alive. The first conclusion I saw a lot of people coming to was that Jingliu was in the coffin, and she snuck out of it by the time Yanqing's companion mission happened. She was exiled from the Alliance, so Luocha bringing her in a coffin could have worked as a way to sneak her on board. But it turns out that wasn't the case at all, leaving me to wonder how exactly Jingliu got on the ship. I guess she just girl bossed her way through security. We finally get our first real glimpse into Luocha's true intentions at the end of 1.3. He and Jingliu reveal they're working together and claim they were the ones who smuggled the Stellaron onto the Luofu. Naturally, this led people to connect two dots and think, oh, the Stellaron was inside the coffin the whole time. Luocha was just lying to Sushang when he said the one in the coffin was somebody he met before. No, that's wrong! Luocha and Jingliu's claim later turned out to be a lie, as confirmed by Yukong at the end of 2.5. The duo lied about being the ones responsible so they could get an audience with the higher-ups of the Alliance and share their plot to kill Yao Shi. Thankfully, in the same cutscene, they finally reveal what has been in the coffin this whole time. His coffin contained a fragment of the body of Tazeronth, the Eon of Propagation. You see, Tazi never technically died at the end of the Swarm disaster. They were sealed in amber by Klopoth. We've gotten multiple hints since then that the Eon could return one day. Knowing this, his conversation with Sushang, all the way back in Wood Sprout Anew, Fate Tilt Askew, is very interesting in retrospect. What's the first line Sushang says when you switch to Dan Heng's perspective?
Hey, Luocha. You didn't finish telling us about the propagation.
It really was right under our noses the whole time, that sneaky bastard. Pretty much every part of this game that highlights the coffin is recontextualized now that we know the contents, including this whole scene. No wonder Luocha would specifically bring up the story of the Swarm disaster when he was carrying around a piece of the propagation's Eon. Although in this same scene, he mentions how he met Tazeronth once before. Either he means he saw Tazeronth sealed in Klopoth's amber, or he somehow met and talked to Tazi before the Eon was sealed away. Makes you really wonder how old this guy is. We will get to you in a minute! Christ almighty! In all seriousness, it's likely the former, in that he met Tazeronth while the Eon was trapped in amber. At multiple points, it's been proven the piece of Tazeronth in the coffin is sentient and conscious, even if it may not be capable of speech. Maybe they were able to come into contact with Luocha telepathically in the past. We won't know for sure until we get further clarification. None of that God-ending scheme is meant to indicate that the Luocha we knew and interacted with in the first couple patches was a complete facade. He's not a two-faced man, more a multifaceted one. Every side we see of Luocha is a true side of him. He's genuinely polite and charismatic, but also a conniving sinner. Luocha has as many layers as an onion, and honestly, that's what makes him so riveting. I didn't mean to make two Shrek references in one video, by the way, that just sort of happened. Let's see, what else is there left to go over? Okay, fine, we'll talk about him now! HI3 fans must have shit a brick when they got a good look at Luocha, because he is unquestionably meant to resemble an infamous character from the Honkai franchise. That character in question is one of the main antagonists of Honkai Impact 3rd, Auto Apocalypse. Not only do they have the same hair color, eye color, as well as the same voice actors, but Luocha's overall appearance is also meant to resemble a specific design of Auto. In the Seven Swords visual novel, Auto is on a journey to Xianzhou, very clever writers, to seek help from Huohuo. He wears an outfit with a similar color scheme of white, black, and green, and carries a coffin by his side. In that visual novel, Otto meets Sushang, who struggles to say his name and refers to him as Raksha, obviously derived from Rakshasa. In HSR, Dan Heng meets Sushang and Luocha together when he steps foot on the Luofu, and he brought the coffin to the Luofu with him to meet and make a deal with Marshal Hua. It's abundantly clear, but that Luocha is heavily inspired by the Seven Swords visual novel and its depiction of Otto in particular. But due to him looking similar to Otto, we have to ask a very important question. Is Luocha an alternate version of Otto, or is he Void Archives? Who's Void Archives, you may be asking? Oh boy, let me tell you! Void Archives is a divine key, a piece of technology made from a Hersher's core that often takes the form of a golden cube. In case anyone here only knows HSR lore, a Hersher, to my understanding at least, is essentially a godlike entity of a certain concept that inhabits a human body. One of the abilities of Void Archives is to mimic anything he understands, including the powers of the other keys. But the trait that serves as the key's namesake is that contained within him is a massive library of information on the previous era of HI3's world. Void was imprisoned in Otto's consciousness and under his control for 500 years. After Otto died, Void Archives escaped the man's consciousness and took over one of his Solium avatars, nanotech clones of Otto that he hopped his consciousness between. At the end of the Alien Space manga, Welt and Void Archives go to space to chase an alien race called the Sky People who invaded their Earth and had plans to invade the Star Rail universe. After they entered said universe, they were eventually found by Himeko and joined the Express. So it's a fact that VA is out there somewhere, and during his time on the Express, he refreshed the Drinksmith robot Shush, named after the last thing Himeko said to him. Himeko legit hates that man, and not gonna lie, after the extensive research I've done, I kinda do too. So is Luocha an XP or is he Void? I don't know. And I'm not going to comment on it either way, because trying to answer that question won't add anything to the rest of the analysis as of now. Besides, I don't want to needlessly extend this video theorizing on something that could instantly be outdated by the very next patch. If you want theory videos, go check out my friend Emma. She made 2 videos on Luocha and was riding off a high when Void appeared in the HI3 crossover. Anyway, there's your reward for how long you had to wait, Luocha fans. You can expect an update video once we do get confirmation of this lingering question. Luocha is such a fascinating character to dissect, even if there are still many unknowns surrounding him. As soon as I thought I reached the end of this rabbit hole, I found a new piece of info and I had to keep digging deeper. Luocha will most definitely continue to be an important character to the grander plot of Star Rail going forward, and I am excited to see how we continue to unravel the mystery around his identity and motivations. As I was writing these analysis videos, I was racking my brain, wondering what went wrong with the first Luofu storyline. Why was it so weak compared to other narratives this game had to offer? And through dissecting the Xianzhou cast, it finally hit me. The Trailblaze mission questline for the Luofu was a very Dan Heng focused storyline. The only characters aside from Dan Heng that did anything noteworthy during the first Luofu questline were the Astral Express crew, Jingliu, Blade, Luocha, Fantilia disguised as tingyun, and to a lesser extent Kafka, Yanqing, and Fu Xuan. They all have some connection to Dan Heng. He's a member of the Astral Express, Jingliu and Blade were teammates with his previous incarnation, and the rest are all closely associated with members of the High Cloud Quintet. And while it wasn't made apparent in the first questline, it's clarified in the second visit that Fantilia and her working with the Sanctus Medicus was part of Tao Run's grand scheme, which also involved Dan Feng's fall from grace. It's pretty obvious from this roster of important characters that the plot was first and foremost meant to contribute to Dan Heng's own development. I know I've jokingly called HSR One Piece in Space before, but to genuinely compare the two, let's use Arlong Park as an example, fitting as it also has one member of the crew split off from the rest of the team, and we get a proper exploration into that member's past. The reason the Arlong Park arc works is because it's kept simple and relatively small scale. We see how much the village suffers under the rule of the Arlong pirates, we learn how much Nami is lost, and that all makes it feel so good when Luffy stops Arlong. It doesn't need any more plot elements to be compelling or fulfilling. It didn't need to be a huge battle or event, especially with how character driven the conflict was. The first Xianzhou questline is like if you took Arlong Park, and tried to have it be of the same scale as Alabasta, an arc that only works because it was the finale to a whole saga we had been building up to. There's too much going on in the first Xianzhou questline that focusing so heavily on Dan Heng's character is a detriment to the other plot elements, leading to a lot of missed potential. One of the characters I listed as being of some level of importance to the first Xianzhou visit was Fu Xuan. Did you notice how her video was almost a summarization of her character stories and cited next to nothing from what occurred with her on screen? We didn't learn anything about her during the main story. Yukong's depth and backstory were saved for her companion mission. Sushang is just kinda there. And again, Bailu, who also has a strong connection to Dan Heng, did just about nothing during the Trailblaze mission. If they went about writing the continuance quest the same way they did the first visit to Luofu, then Feixiao would have been front and center, while everyone else had scraps for screen time. But no, we get a good amount of time spent on characters that aren't Feixiao and her retainers. Lingsha gets solid characterization in scenes that also set up what will likely be the next major Xianzhou arc, and obviously there's Yanqing and Yunli's dynamic and their dual mentoring of March. The second Luofu storyline more effectively utilized and fleshed out the grander Xianzhou cast, which is a necessity for a storyline as big in scale as what they were going for. Tingyun is the perfect example of the missteps taken in the original Luofu arc. You can tell the writers were aiming for Fantalia to be a twist villain. There are multiple ways to pull off a twist villain, but above all, you first need to spend time setting up the villain's false persona while giving hints towards their true colors. Like pretty much any narrative twist, a twist villain should be something built up to, not something you randomly throw in as a curveball. And that's where HSR fumbled. In the pretty short amount of screen time the fake Tingyun got, we only learned the bare basics about her false persona. We don't even get any real hints towards the reveal before Fantalia drops the facade. Something that the best twist villains live on is how you can re-watch certain scenes of that villain with their true intentions in mind, and you understand, oh, that's why they said that thing. The only piece of dialogue that had a whole new meaning on a second viewing was Tingyun showing interest in immortality in a text conversation. That is the only substantial hint we get towards Fantalia prior to Dan Shu calling her out, so this really should have been a voiced piece of dialogue during a cutscene. It really felt like the fake Tingyun's betrayal and death was just a twist done for shock value. On the other hand, Fugue is an example of how the writers have course corrected since then. I'd compare it to the writing of Sonic Frontiers and Shadow Generations. It doesn't erase the not so good writing decisions that came before, but rather builds off them to move the story in a better direction. I do believe it was always the intention to revive Tingyun, due to the unwritten rule that is, if we don't see the death and or corpse on screen, then they're still alive. The way they brought Tingyun back made sense and naturally wove her into the long-running storyline of the Xianzhou. They gave us a good amount of character moments with Fugue to properly re-establish her and give her a personal struggle we could get invested in. She now truly feels like a character and not a plot device for a twist. Characters and the utilization of them often make or break a story. The jump in quality between the two Xianzhou storylines is an excellent example of this principle. And it's that increase in story quality that makes me interested for what the next Xianzhou arc has in store for us. But that's enough from me. This video is already long enough as it is. If you enjoyed the video, I ask that you consider hitting the like and subscribe buttons and to leave a comment as well. Interacting with my content in those ways really helps me grow as a creator on the platform. And look forward to my analyses on Amphoria's characters when those come out. Until next time, thank you for coming by the Matsunoki Cafe, and stay safe out there.